hadn't invented all this electronic stuff. Welcome to the 2025 Madison Town Meeting. I'm George Epstein. I'm your moderator. Let's start things off by my request for you to stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I'd like you to join me, and if those of you who are in line and the check-in people, if you could pause for just a moment, I'd ask you to turn to the first page in these books, if you have a book. But three people are being honored in here, in memoriam. Henry Forrest, Ginny Perot, and Sonny Graves, three people who served our community for many, many years in many different roles, and people who I considered a friend, many of you considered a friend, and people who just contributed a lot to our community, were great neighbors to us all. And if you could just join me for a moment of silence in remembrance of them. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you all for being here again. Those of you in line are all getting your ballots so that you can vote permissibly. If you don't have one of these and you're already seated, you could wait a few minutes if you don't want to stand in line, but we do have to have these in order for you to vote. Again, there are chairs. They're being pulled out for people. They'll be set up. So there should be plenty of chairs. We can use the sides. Probably could put another row in the middle as well without any problem at all. I think we're going to be good with the total number of seats. Before we get too much further, I'm going to ask Sharon Schilling, who is the chair of our budget committee, to introduce the members of her budget committee group.
Good morning. As George said, I'm Sharon Schilling. I'm the chair of the advisory budget.
And please put those microphones close.
How's that?
Good. No, that wasn't you, Sharon.
That wasn't me? Okay.
No.
To my left is Ron Force. To his left is Rick Judkins. Next is Sarah DiMartino, and then Joe Dame, who's the vice chair.
Thank you. And to my right, we have Adam Price, who is the chair of the Board of Selectmen. I'm going to ask you to introduce the crew to my right.
Sure. At the beginning of the table, we have Town Clerk Michael Brooks, Selectman John Arruda, Selectman Joy Gray. To my right, Town Administrator Linda Shackford, and to her right, Attorney Chris Bolt.
Thank you. And again, before we go any further, I've lost track, but for the past quarter century or so, John Arruda has served our community as a selectman, and I want to take a moment just to recognize all those years of service. He's probably more famous as a dump guy right now, but his service as our selectman has been challenging and difficult. Yeah, thank you. On page 11 of your books is a set of rules that I've made up over the years and have been in place for many years about how this meeting should operate. The most important rule for you to remember is that you can change any of those rules any way you want. If you don't like what I'm doing or the way I'm running the meeting, simply say point of order, even interrupting if you must. Simply say, point of order, Mr. Moderator, I'd like to overrule you on this. We don't debate a point of order, but you have the opportunity to overrule me and do something different, and you simply state how you'd like the meeting to be run differently. You are in control. I am not. I am simply your vessel up here in the front of the room. It might not always seem that way. I'm going to push you around a little bit, but you are very much in charge, and please overrule me as necessary. With all of that, I'm going to ask you to join me on the blue pages in the book or the town warrant that you have in the back of the room. Hopefully everyone has something to follow along with. And Article 1 has already been addressed, the choosing of the officers. To the degree that the check-in people can whisper a little bit, I'd appreciate it, just so people aren't particularly distracted. So what we have is Article 2 is the first hunk of the operating budget, and that will be put on the floor by Selectman Chairman Adam Price. But since the book was printed, there's been a change, and he's going to put a slightly different, well, slightly, not so slightly, different number on the floor here, and then he will explain why the number is somewhat different. So we don't have to go through an amendment process. The number that will be put on the floor will be the number that he announces as we go through, as he presents Article 2. So, Mr. Price, would you put Article 2 on the floor? I'll then ask for a second, and then I'll let you speak to it.
I would like to move Article 2
With
an amended number of $1,844,026.
So I will now read it to see if town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $1,844,026 for general government. This article does not include appropriations contained in special or individual articles addressed. And do I have a second to that? Mr. Arruda. So I'm going to ask Adam to explain the rationale.
So, I lost my paper here. Can I see that for a second? I think it was last night or the night before, we lost the furnace in the lower garage. And just this morning, we received an estimate from Eastern Propane to replace that furnace for a sum of $18,500 to $20,000 as their estimate. Obviously, it happened after the budgeting process, but Eastern has condemned that furnace.
Thank you. So if you look down the list here, the row in which that $20,000 would show up is which one, Mr. Price?
That would be general government buildings. So that line will go from 163.2 to 183.2.
So that changes two things. It changes that row on your book from 163,200 to 183,200, and it changes to $1,844,026 from the lower figure. With that, what we normally would do, what we'll do today, is just walk down the rows of this particular article and give people the opportunity to pop up, ask questions, or make amendments, and I'll talk about the amendment process when that comes to the fore. So if you have questions, concerns, comments on any of these, please stand up by the front microphone here, or get in a row for that microphone, and make such comments as you would like, or such amendments as you would like. You are a legislative body. No one's representing you today. Each of you is your own legislator, and you have the opportunity to debate, to question, to make comments, and to make amendments as you see fit. So I'll start with animal, and do you want to go ahead?
I need one more second.
Go ahead.
If you don't mind. Typically with the PEG TV line, I know we haven't gone down through all the lines yet, we would amend that number based on franchise fees received. We are not looking to do that this year. However, I do want to note that franchise fees that were received were $40,433.
Essentially the revenue to support the slightly larger number that's in here.
Yes, correct. So
Thank you.
40,000 of that will come from franchise fees, and the rest will be raised and appropriated.
Okay. So here we go. Animal pest control, comments, questions. We can go back if I move too fast and you want to go back to one, that's fine. Assessing, something we're getting started with in the very near future in town. Comments or questions? Building inspection. We have a building inspector, someone who checks out our and grants us our building permits. And there's revenue associated with that that offsets some of that number. And somewhere here in this book would be that. You can also ask about what the revenue is that supports any of these lines. Conservation Commission. Direct assistance. Election registration and vital statistics. It's where the moderator gets the big bucks. Executive. Largely salaries. Yes, sir. Please introduce yourself and ask or comment.
Good morning. Ted Slater. Is that on?
Yes.
I'm on Pine Hill Road. I'm not accustomed to this, so bear with me. I am making a motion to reduce the Select Board's annual stipend from $7,000 to $5,000. This would be a savings of $10,000 a year.
Just a second.
Yep.
So before you speak to it, I'm going to look for a second. It's a second to reduce the compensation, which is in the budget here, for $7,000 per select person to $5,000. Is there a second to that motion? And I'll explain how that will affect things when we get to it. But I have a second from Select Person Gray. And am I in the right place for executive as the place to make that change? So all good. There is an amendment then on the floor that would reduce the overall budget and this particular line by $10,000. 5 selectmen times 2, 2,000. Reducing it from 7 to 5, 2,000 per. 5 times 2,000 is $10,000. Mr. Slater, please proceed.
Please refer to page 86 in your annual report under the section Executive, and then under that, the Selectman stipend. You can see that $21,000 is budgeted for this year. At the Town Budget Committee meeting in February, Select Person Joy Gray made a similar motion, which died for the lack of a second. She had cited that neighboring towns had lower salaries. I have information that the Select Board salaries in 9 neighboring towns averages about $4,400 a year. And according to my little bit of research, in 2015, the salary went from $4,000 to $6,000 and then to $7,000 in 2022. Based on this information, and given the town's current fiscal climate, it would seem reasonable to set the new stipend at $5,000. Thank you.
Thank you. You did a nice job of staying well within your 2 minutes. So we have a 2-minute limit for each individual speaker. So we have an amendment on the floor to reduce the stipend for the select persons from $7,000 to $5,000. And in fact, what that would do is reduce the line item executive by $10,000, but it would reduce the bottom line number of $1,844,200 to $1,834,200. Might as well just say it now and get it out of the way. Yes, you vote the bottom line budget, and the Select Board, as the executive branch of our government, has the opportunity to move money around within there. They don't have to stay within these line items that you see in the book. There are some restrictions on them, but basically they have a lot of freedom to move the dollars around within that amount. The Select Board and the School Board in Madison has done a very nice job over the years when there has been an amendment that has a specific purpose, such as reducing the salaries of the Select Board, of sticking with what the town asks them to do, and the minutes that the town clerk is taking will reflect the reason for it. So yeah, they don't absolutely, if we reduce the budget by $10,000, have to use that to reduce the selectmen's salaries. but they've, as far as I can remember, for 38 years of being the town moderator, they've followed the instructions of the town very clearly. So I'm giving you that information. You should have that, know that's part of it. Yes, sir.
Hi, Mike Vayu. I did look around a little bit to see what the towns in the area were, giving as a stipend for selectmen, and I thought about this issue when it came up, and I heard it, and thinking what the other towns are doing and the responsibility of a selectman, which is large, the fact that we're going from 3 to 5, which hopefully would lessen the share of the work. And I called Conway because I asked them what they were getting, because to me, Conway's a pretty big town, a lot of work. And the young lady that at their office said it was $3,000. I said, $3,000? And come to find out, it's actually 4. But either way, I said, only $3,000? And she said, they consider it public service. And that kind of like settled in well on me.
Thank you.
Mr. Moderator, can we just point out that Conway runs a completely different style of government?
Why don't you make sure you have the microphone there and repeat that and any other comments that you
So
might
just
have.
speaking to Conway in particular, they run an almost completely different style of government where they have a town manager that has the authority of selectmen to share that workload with. And that town manager, if I'm not mistaken, runs somewhere around $125,000 a year.
Thank you. Other comments or questions before we vote on the amendment? Yes.
Tamworth runs a similar shop as us, same size, 5 selectmen, and I believe they are $3,000 a year.
Thank you. And thanks for interrupting me. I don't always have you in my line of vision. When I was younger and played basketball, I had terrific peripheral vision, but not anymore. Yes.
Good morning, Donna Vayu. Selectman, is it true that the selectmen added $12,000 to this line item for extra office help?
We did add some money to that line for some extra office help, yes. I can't remember-
12,000? Was it 12,000?
I can't remember off the top of my head if it was exactly 12,000 or not, but it was, yes.
12.
Yep.
Thank you.
Other comments or questions? Seeing none, we'll vote on the amendment. If you choose to vote yes, you are voting in favor of reducing the stipend for selectmen from $7,000 to $5,000. If you vote yes. If you vote no, you're voting to essentially leave the stipend at $7,000 per select person. So, all those in favor of reducing the stipend from $7,000 to $5,000, please raise your hand with your ballots in your hand. Thank you. All opposed, please raise your hand. The ayes appear to have it, and if no one objects, I declare it a vote, and the amendment has passed. So the number that is now currently on the budget for this warrant article is $1,834,200. Excuse me.
Mr. Moderator,
Yes.
final 2 digits, it's 26, not 200.
Wow. Thank you. I knew there was a reason we need a lawyer here. Yes, the final number, currently the final number for Article 2 is $1,834,026. Boy, the math teacher fails again. Okay, so we're at executive, and we're going to keep on going down the rows. Financial administration. General government buildings, that's where the $20,000 was added. General government equipment. Insurance. Interest tax anticipation notes. There's a line in there with the buck in case we had to borrow because tax money wasn't coming in fast enough and bills were coming in too fast. And so gives the town the opportunity to borrow. And if you don't have anything in there for tax anticipation notes, you can't borrow because you don't have any right to spend money on interest. So they put the dollar in, and then that would entail moving some money around if they actually had to do it. Haven't had to do it since we moved to the 2 tax bills a year approach rather than 1 tax bill that we had long ago. Legal, $24,800. Library, Madison Peg TV, you heard some information about the revenue associated with that. Notes due, that's stuff we've already borrowed for. Patriotic purposes, personnel administration, planning board, and again, we can go back to any line that anyone would like to consider. Rec program, street lighting, and zoning board. And any general comments that anyone would like to make.
Hi, Melissa LaRoche. I was just wondering.
Right up, be aggressive with you.
I don't like this.
I know you don't like this.
Can I just get a little explanation on the library increase for the year?
Yes, all right.
Melissa LaRoche.
Any comments either by library board members or trustees? Yes.
Cheryl Littlefield, and I'm the chair of the trustees for the library. And we have increased our library director's time to make it full-time, so 35 hours a week. So that's why there's the increase in that.
Understood. Thank you. Other comments or questions? The back of the room, the PTO has provided us with a variety of baked goods and foods and things, and please go back there and give them your money and take their food. It's really good stuff. Thank you. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Donna Vayu again. I think it's great that our librarian is starting to get paid full-time. She's been working full-time, I would say, for the last 2 or 3 years. So I would support this amendment.
It's not an amendment, but we're supporting the number in the budget. Very good. Yes, sir. Whoop, they tried to get you.
Good morning. Mark Fonts, Go Hill Road. Just clarification on 2 items. On the legal line item, is that all legal expenses for the town, or are there legal expenses incorporated into other line items?
You ready for me?
Please, yes.
Yeah, so this is legal expenses for this particular board. The planning board and zoning board have their own legal lines.
Okay. And then on notes due, that number, is that principal and interest, or is that just interest?
It's principal and interest. It's the entire payment.
Okay, thank you.
Jen Garside, High Street, New Hampshire. Elections. I want to know why supervisor checklists our pay got cut in half this year. Supervisor of the checklist, our pay got cut in half this year. I'm curious to know why.
Does this have to do with the number of elections?
I've been doing this a long time and my pay's never been cut, so I'm just curious.
I'm going to take a guess, and I'm going to ask you guys to back me up or not, but we just finished the presidential election year where we have the multiple primaries and all that stuff. And so that's over, and this year coming up, we have fewer elections.
Right.
And so it's not, I don't think that the pay was cut. It was.
So I've been doing this for, I don't know how many years. I used to get $500.
Oh.
The last, I don't know, at least 5 years, I've gotten $700. This past year, I got $1,000, and now I'm cut down to $500.
Ah, thank you. I always get $450. I'm not, no complaint, public service, right, all that? Okay, yes.
I don't have a direct answer for you. This is a number that was presented to the board as a whole. This board did not cut those stipends.
In the past, the moderator was paid based on the number of elections that occurred, and my pay fluctuated, but for a bunch of years, I've gotten the flat $450. No, I'm not. It would be completely inappropriate, and the attorney would point that out to all of you. He's nodding his head. Perhaps someone made a decision to fluctuate the pay of the supervisors based on the number of elections, but that would be a good thing to get an answer to and make sure everybody understood what that compensation was. Go ahead, Joy Gray, do you have something?
Did the town clerk set that budget, and would he like to speak to it?
The moderator is correct. I believe, if my memory serves, the amount was $250 per checklist session. So in the big election year, this past year, it was increased drastically, but the selectmen requested an explanation of that, and the only way to do anything was to tie it to the number of elections, which doesn't really work because there's different times when the supervisors have to work that's not an election. So we characterize it as a checklist session if there's an official checklist involved, and I believe the amount was set at $250, but I'm not positive.
Certainly it's open to amendment and perhaps a more formal establishment of the compensation package for supervisors of the checklist. They're terrific. Thank goodness they're here. It's not an easy job, and it's one that just interrupts your life. There are times when you just have to be there, and they've been terrific. Yes.
Linda Haver, 35 Pebblebrook Road, Madison, New Hampshire. Just thinking things over, I understand what I'm going to say might not be popular, but I just, as an advocate for kids, I feel like I have to say it. Since we're saving that, like we voted, right? We're saving the $10,000 from the, I'm wondering if we could take 1,100 of that and put it in the rec department. I understand, I don't know if that's possible, and my feelings won't be hurt if it isn't, but it seems like a small amount of money that might help them. I just wanted.
Was there a particular purpose for the $1,100?
No, just, well, to bring it to $5,000. That was, I
Gotcha.
thought that would bring it.
All right, so did you want to make an amendment, move an amendment to add $1,100 to the rec program?
I do. Do I need to come back up?
No, you can stay right there. I'll accept that. Is there a second to that motion to amend it by $1,100? Yes, ma'am. Okay. And your name is?
Carol. My name is Carol Penza, and I'm on Palm Road. I guess I don't have a question. I just want to express that I'm concerned that nobody knows where these numbers are coming from, that nobody can definitively tell me how much the supervisor checklist gets, whether it went up or down. That's all I want to say.
Thank you. And I will ask for any follow-up information that the folks to my right might have on any of these items. Sometimes it takes a while to find a particular number. So we have an amendment on the floor to increase the rec program by $1,100. Is there any further discussion regarding that? Seeing none, we'll vote. All those in favor of increasing the rec program by $1,100, please raise your hand. Thank you. All those opposed, please raise your hand. Thank you. You can do it with a hand vote one more time. So hold your hand up nice and high. All those in favor of the $1,100 addition to the rec program, please raise your hand. Thank you. All those opposed, please raise your hand. I believe the nays have it. Does anyone want to contest that? Then I deem the amendment defeated, and we are back to the number we were just at. Sorry, just going to make a couple of notes. I will read the article as it stands now after amendment to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $1,834,026 for general government. This article does not include appropriations contained in special or individual articles addressed separately. Do we have any further discussion before we vote on Article 2? We've amended it up and down a little bit. But we're ready to vote on the actual motion itself and to move on to the next article. Okay, all those in favor of Article 2 as I just read it, please raise your hand with your ballot in it. Thank you. All those opposed, please raise your hand. Thank you. Article 2 passes as amended at $1,834,026. What we don't do in Madison is take the time after each warrant article to say we vote to not reconsider it, which means that at the end of the meeting, which will be only an hour from now, and a bunch of you have left, that someone can't pull this up and say, gee, I want to reconsider and I want to change it. And in some towns, people hang around and they do that, and it's nasty. And those towns, after every single warrant article, they have a vote to say, we will not go back and reconsider that. We don't do that here and waste the time doing that because I'm the moderator and I would yell at anybody who tried to reopen Article 2, and you're all afraid of me enough. So we don't bother doing that. It's not illegal. If you wanted to get up and say you want to move not to reconsider, go ahead, but we're not going to do that unless you want to. Article 3, see if the town will vote to ratify a 7-year lease agreement entered into by the selectmen in the amount of $377,500 for the purpose of leasing a grader and to raise and appropriate $67,600 for the first year's payment for that purpose. This lease agreement contains an escape clause, and the town will own the grader at the end of 7 years. Is there a move and second by the people to my right? Yes.
I will move it.
Okay, and a second by Mr. Arruda. So Price and Arruda. Now, Article 3 and Article 4, if you go down and read Article 4, are clearly tightly interrelated, and potentially they would have an influence on Article 5, which is the highway budget. And this is the topic that's received the most discussion in our hearings and so on. There are a couple of things I'm going to ask of you. If somebody needs to do a very quick recap of what occurred last spring after last year's town meeting that resulted in us entering into the lease for a new grader, I guess I'd let you do a very quick 45-second recap of that history. But we are not here today to do a recap of what occurred last year. It could be a lengthy process, and people get excited about that one, and that's not what we're here for. We're here for the warrant that's in front of us and the actions we have to take today. So I'm going to ask you to keep your focus on the decisions and the discussion about Article 3 and Article 4. So when you get up to discuss Article 3, feel free to comment on Article 4 and how you think they should interrelate and so on. All that is absolutely fine. The discussion is essentially one big discussion about how we're going to manage those. There is a handout from the Budget Committee from the back of the room that might be helpful. And one of the things I don't want to do, I'm looking to my left here, I don't want to learn about where it was manufactured or the mother-in-law of the person who added the plow to the side of it or any of that stuff. Let's keep the focus on the decision at hand and make this a good and open and free discussion, but one that stays focused on the two warrant articles that are actually in front of us, okay? Be respectful of everyone's time here. I'm going to start by asking the Select Board and the person who put the article on the floor to speak first. Mr. Price.
Yeah, just a couple key points. The three biggest points with this grader that have been discussed over time, one being the usage of the grader. I know it's been discussed quite a bit that we might only use this grader twice a year, and that is not the case. This grader is used multiple times. I know the primary use is spring and fall grading, but we use it for plowing, ditching, shouldering, shimming, all sorts of things throughout the year. So not having a grader, it would be a detriment to this town. The other big topic of discussion was a 140 versus a 120. And somewhere along the line, it came up that one was construction and one was maintenance. And that is not a distinction made by any grader manufacturer that we know of. The difference between the two is 4,000 pounds and 50 horsepower. We run the same grader now that is run by multiple surrounding towns. And the other big point that was brought up was the opportunity to rent. And I think what we need to understand is that the company that we rent from rents to us as a favor. They are not in the rental business, and the opportunity to rent that grader does not present itself as often as we'd like. So rental is not an option. And what we were dealing with is a 1987 grader. And last year we knew that it was going to be coming time to replace this grader, but after putting thousands of dollars of insurance money into fixing that one, we were hopeful that we could get another year out of it, and that simply wasn't the case when it failed in the late summer. And the biggest point is price point. So at the time, we spent, I believe it's $410,000 before trade-in. That grader now is $80,000 more. And I think we need to keep in mind that we got a great deal on a grader that's used by over a dozen municipalities in this area.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for staying within the time frame. Other comments or questions with regard to Article 3? Remember, Article 3 is ratifying the action that the board took last spring to enter into this lease and to continue in the lease. And Article 4, if Article 3 fails, presents an alternative approach. Yes?
Nicole Nordland, based, I don't know if it's to you guys or those guys.
Tilt it just a little down.
Based on your research, does the 377,500 represent the entire amount, or is there an interest on top of that? And if there's more interest, how much interest to give the full price? Thank you.
Thank you.
The total amount after interest is $473,000.
Point of clarification?
Yes.
That $473,000 is what we would currently owe. The total price, including the $32,000 of the trade-in, is $503,000 for the grader.
Mr. Moderator?
Yes.
If I could speak to a little bit.
Yes, please.
So back in November and December, we received multiple quotes on a grader. I wasn't a selectman at the time. I didn't have any of that information. 2 went to sales order that were ready to sign. One in November. They were used ones. One of them was going to be $160,000. I think a second one was going to be $225. I have it in my notebook. That went to sales order. The sales order, I don't know what happened. The sales orders weren't signed. And then we weren't looking for new graders. Again, as far as I know, we weren't looking for any new graders. We don't have any quotes for January, February, March. So at town meeting, we had the opportunity to put more than $10,000 in the Highway Heavy Expendable Trust Fund. We didn't. We only put $10,000 in, and there was no discussion of a grader or anything. And then 2 months later, there was a panic. We need one now. And my frustration is, I don't like that we operated that way. I don't like that that's how we're managing.
But we're not
the money.
emphasizing what occurred in the past. We're emphasizing what we do forward.
Right. And what we do forward, we have the option in Article 3 to accept what's been done and accept $67,000 a year payment and a total of $95,000 interest. We also have the option to vote no on Article 3, which would bring us to Article 4. Article 4 is only an option if we vote no on 3. So in Article 4 would be a yes vote to pay off the grader, which at current is approximately, I think, $409,000, including the payment that's due in June. That would save us between $60,000 and $70,000 in interest. The estimated sale price of the grader at minimum is $430,000 to $440,000, and that was just based on one quote I got from the company that sold us this grader. So at a minimum, it's a $20,000 to $30,000 profit, and we would save $60,000 in interest. Then we would be, as part of Article 4, selling the grader. There's no timeline given that we would have to sell it tomorrow. So we could use it until we find a replacement that the town would vote on.
Thank you.
Just to clarify, we could use it until we sell it. However, we wouldn't be able to buy one until next year's town meeting. So usage in the fall, the winging, the shouldering, the shimming would likely not take place should Article 3 fail.
Thank you.
Jake Bowie, Village Road. My concern with Article 4 is if we do decide to sell it and we take our time using it, adding hours and wear and tear on the vehicle, the sale price is going to decrease. As you use the machine, depreciation is going to be huge. So if that is the case, we also lose the $30,000 or $33,000 we got for the old grader, left with no grader. So you talk about buying used ones come with bugs. And what I mean by that is someone in the construction field knows that when you get used equipment, it typically has issues. If it's too used, there's no warranty. That falls back on the town to maintain and fix these issues. So I think that selling it would be a detriment to the community. We wouldn't have one for 18 to 24 months probably at best case scenario. And you may sound like you're saving $60,000 in interest, but I feel like you're going to end up losing $60,000 in the initial cost of your machine, plus whatever you depreciate on top of that.
And if I could speak to the used equipment for a moment, one of those graders that was presented to us that Joy was speaking to, we took our time reading over the contract before signing, and in doing so, we lost the opportunity to purchase a used grader, and come to find out that very used grader lost the transmission not 2 weeks after it was sold to another municipality, which is a risk you take buying used equipment.
Thank you. Yeah. Other comments or questions?
I've seen them working hard with that grader, so I'm proud of it.
Thank you. Is there another comment? Yes.
I don't think anyone in this audience disagrees that the town needs a road grader. I know that that has come up a couple times, but no one on this board or our committee or in the public disagrees that we need use of a grader. What I contend is that before we entered into this agreement, there was not enough due diligence. In fact, the selectmen hadn't done really any due diligence. It was up to the advisory budget committee.
But we're not going to talk about that, are we?
It's important to understand. It's important to understand that there are options, and while Mr. Price would say that we're not unable to.
Please direct any comments to me. Do not go back through the past. Explain what you want to do going forward.
Let's not repeat the past. Let's look going forward at what our options are for moving forward. Okay? We have committed, without the town's permission, to enter into a lease agreement without looking at the full options. I understand we had a sense of urgency, but it was a created sense of urgency.
Let's please talk about what you want to do going forward. I'm really going to stop if you want to dwell on what happened last spring.
I urge you to read the Advisory Budget Committee's statement indicating all the information. It's important to understand it. Going forward, I don't see any reason why voting no on option 3 and voting yes on option 4, that we couldn't continue to rent a grader, enter into a long-term relationship with a company that we find. The DPW director's own words during Advisory Budget Committee were that we only use it a couple weeks a year. We are spending $67,000 a year for a grader that we only use a couple weeks. I don't know that that's financially sound decision, okay? I also understand that with this current grader, they have the ability to use it a bit more for some wing plowing and things of that nature. Those issues can also be accomplished with the trucks we already have. I would urge you, as the Advisory Budget Committee did, to disapprove this.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, sir.
A couple things, Mr. Moderator. if I may.
I'm going to let people who are standing, and in fact, Mr. Aruda, you wanted to say something at one point. Please go ahead.
I'm not the kind of person that spends a lot of money, but this is a 30-year investment. We have spent no money on any grader other than repairs since 1987. So it's not like we're going to be buying graders on a regular basis. Many of us in this room will never see the next grader, myself included.
I became the moderator when we bought that last grader, so it's all my responsibility. Yes, sir.
Ned Rogerson, Woodland Road. To me, this is a cash flow problem. I mean, we are where we are right now, and it's a risk problem. That's the other item. And there are a number of things that are the risks. The risks are, can you sell it for what you think you can sell it? Don't know. Can you buy another grader for what you think you can buy the grader? Because that grader, although we weren't supposed to say it came from South America, I believe it did come from South America. And we have something that's called tariffs now. And I have no idea what the tariffs are going to be. And they may not be anything. We may not decide to put tariffs on that country, but we might. So you've got an issue here that basically boils down to, are you really going to save much money at the end of the day, or are you going to feel better because maybe you have a slightly used grader or a grader that it doesn't have as much capability and maybe fits someplace better, like you can store it undercover, whatever it happens to be. Those to me are issues that are unknowns a little bit. And I think the whole issue of selling the grader to get money to then try to buy another grader, and the time frame when we have to come back to another town meeting in order to approve it the way it should have been approved perhaps the first time around, well, it's a cash flow problem and a risk problem, and I don't, as much as I hate to say it, that really bothers me.
Thank you. Excuse me.
Nicole Nordland again. Just for clarification, and Ned just said it again, why do we have to wait if we already bought one without, why do we have to wait for another town meeting if we already own one when we didn't have town meeting? I'm confused, and just, I need that for information if it's a fact that we're gonna have to wait longer than our needs are or not. Can we vote to replace it and get it before next year, is my point, I guess. I'm just curious what the actual fact on that is.
Good question. The moderator was a little confused. Just so I have it, too, we followed the process last year that resulted in entering into a lease arrangement, which incorporates interest through a public hearing process and a vote of the Board of Selectmen to proceed. And you were able to do that without a town meeting because we needed a grader, and you followed that process. Entered into a lease. The purchase of something for $400,000 or whatever would, without any interest, but actually taking the money from the sale of this grader and using it to purchase another grader, that would require a town meeting to make that large capital expenditure because it wouldn't be entering into a lease. Is that an accurate statement?
That is correct, and I know we don't want to get into the process, but I think that's the problem that a lot of people have. So if we're not looking to repeat that same process again, because not just the public was uncomfortable with the way it went down.
Thank you. Thank you. Nicole, is that, I don't see where you are. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for the question. Yes.
Deb Parsons, 4 Thuses Road. I have a couple quick questions and then a comment. Try to stay in my 2 minutes. You mentioned that there was a company that we rent from that somehow does it out of the goodness of their hearts, but could you tell me who that company is?
That would be Burke.
Okay, and then second, has the selectmen looked into talking to the Edelweiss commissioners about their grader and the availability of it?
We have not looked into that, but they're also in use of their grader. The problem is usage and timing. If we have a rain event where we need a grader to fix a road or something like that, there's a good chance Edelweiss also had that same rain event is going to need their grader.
Okay, I live in Edelweiss, and I rarely see, the grader is rarely out, so I believe that would be an avenue that we could look into in terms of what could hold us over until we need to get something else. And I'm going to disagree with the moderator with stifling about the process, because the process is why we're having this discussion. You lose the trust of the voters, and when we stand here, like Ms. Penza said, people are not able to tell us why things are being changed and what for, you lose our confidence, and then we just vote no on everything. So I disagree that the process shouldn't be talked about, because that's what everybody has a problem with.
So making a motion to overrule the moderator and to allow a discussion and a review of what occurred last spring is a perfectly appropriate amendment, a perfectly appropriate point of order. And if someone would like to move to overrule the moderator and reconsider or consider the process that was followed last spring, I would accept that, and we would have a second, and we would vote as to whether to enter into that discussion. But moderator is trained, just to explain, the moderator is trained to focus on the warrant. The warrant comes from the word warn. You've been warned as to what we will talk about, and that's a warrant you have to stick to. The town has to stick to it. The state would require us to stick to it. And focusing on what has been warned as the topics we'll talk about is the purpose of this meeting. And we have not been warned, and there's no warrant article to say we should do something different. We should have a discussion about what happened last spring. What we've been warned about is that there'll be a discussion about Articles 3 and 4 and how we're going to handle the question of the road grader going forward. So I'm obligated, from my perspective, to move forward solely on what you've been warned that we will talk about. And that does... Excuse me. And so I am simply following the training that I've received and an effort to be respectful of the amount of time that you folks want to devote to a Saturday morning. Having said that, anyone who wants to, if you would like, to make a motion to overrule the moderator as a point of order, overrule the moderator and open up discussion to reviewing what occurred last spring, absolutely is fine to do. Would you like to make such a motion? Okay.
I would just like to say that we've discussed this grader till we've been blue in the face. We've had budget committee meetings about it, selectmen meetings about it. There have been multiple times to discuss it. So that's my point.
So you're actually on my side.
Correct.
I was looking for a fight. No, you guys got to find another moderator. You're tired of me. Go ahead, please, sir.
Jake Bowie again. Part of using the grader more often would create less wear and tear on our big trucks that we use to plow. So those trucks are also very expensive to replace, and the pieces and parts that we put on them to use as plows and such also cost a lot of money. This machine's built for that sort of pressure, that sort of wear and tear. You also can't ditch with a truck. You have to ditch with a piece of equipment, whether it be the grader or an excavator. But a well-trained grader operator like we have can do most of the ditching with that piece of equipment, which again alleviates more wear and tear on the excavators and the other pieces of machinery we have. I know it seems like a lot, but if we sell it and get our money back or whatever, the machine you want to buy, say it's the smaller one, is going to be $60,000 to $80,000. This is my guess, looking at the trend, more expensive than the one we purchased at a bigger size. So renting, I mean, maybe Idlewise would give it once in a while. I know Burke has a solid year of work for their grader, at least for me talking to the owner of the company. So renting from them is probably not going to happen. Again, to the point made about a major rain event or an issue where we need a grader, everyone who has a grader will be using it. So I don't see rental as even an option.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi, Tony Romelli. I live on Charlotte Point Road, which is off the Winter Road in Madison, which is our scenic road. I challenge anybody that doesn't live on a Winter Road, that doesn't live on a dirt road, to go down Charlotte Point and Winter Road and see how bad it is. The town comes down with the grader every year and does a fantastic job. This year they came down with the grader, and this is probably going to bite me, but when they came down this year with the new grader, they did it in one shot deal. With the old grader that they had, they were down there for like a week. So we're saving money by the big grader, and they do need this, and we don't need used equipment to cost us more money. Anybody that has bought used equipment or a used car, how much money do you put into it? Just buy a new one, let's bite the bullet, and let's just get this thing going, and let's stop this stuff of the argument on new or old or whatever. The town needs it. There's 27 miles of dirt roads in this town, and I don't think they can do it with the small grader in one day. Thank you, and have a great day.
Thank you.
I'll echo what that gentleman said a little bit, Mark Font, sorry. And I also just want to say, the selectmen hire a DPW director. I trust that they hire the right person. I trust the selectmen to make the decisions for us in a situation like they were in last year, where they couldn't, it wasn't going to go to a town-wide vote. I'm in favor of option 3.
Thank you.
Sorry, I thought of another question, Deb Parsons. What if 3 and 4 fail?
I'll
Mr. Moderator, if three fails and 4 fails, I believe that we have the ability to, what he didn't really want to do is, that's why Article 5 was put after so we could amend Article 5 to increase
address.
in order to do something.
Okay,
So
just curious.
the point is there's an escape clause in the lease, and if both articles fail,
Seems like there are 2 things that could happen. If both articles fail, Article 3 up here says we're voting whether to ratify the lease. The fact that we don't ratify the lease, I'm not sure what that really means, except that, as you said, there's an escape clause from the lease, and we would give them back the piece of equipment. The other option would be for the selectmen to say, gee, it wasn't ratified, but that doesn't necessarily end the lease. And I bet the lawyer would nod his head if I said the selectmen could probably just continue to pay the lease payments, and they wouldn't necessarily be violating the vote of the town. And he's thinking about that.
I will respectfully disagree, Mr. Moderator.
Oh, no, that's fine. Good. So you would interpret the defeat of Article 3 as requiring that the lease be brought to an end and the escape clause be implemented?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. That's what I was looking for. And so the only option then would be whatever whatever rental opportunities would be available initially. Okay. Yes, sir.
Reed Heath, Walnut Loop. I'd like to understand a little bit more about this lease. Typically speaking, leases have a buyout at the end. Is there a buyout, or is this a full lease where you own it at the end, is one of the questions.
We will
Well,
own it.
answer that one. Go ahead.
We will own it at the end.
You'll own it at the end, so a $0 buyout?
They can buy
Or is there a buyout at the end that we're going to have to put more money up for that?
It's a $0 buyout. We
Okay.
will own the piece of equipment.
So that's much better than saying, I mean, if you go buy a car from local town Chevrolet, you're going to have a nice low lease payment, but you're going to owe about 30 grand to buy it out. So I have to agree, having been in the car business for a long time prior to my career now, that if you go take that brand new grader and sell it or trade it, you're going to lose your shirt.
Thank you.
So I think we only have one option, is to stay with it.
Thank you.
So,
you-
sorry, Mr. Moderator.
Yes, okay, go ahead.
Thank you. So as we've heard, it was a great deal, which means we stand to get a great profit in selling it. We stand to save $60,000 to $70,000 in interest. If we pay it off, which we would take from the unassigned fund balance where we have the money to do so, if we pay it off, we don't pay the interest, and we have a year until next town meeting to use the grader because we own it at that point. If we vote for 4 today, if we vote yes for 4, we own it without paying the interest. We then have a year until next town meeting to prepare to buy a new one, new or used, to prepare to sell this one for the best rate possible. And it just gives us time to figure this out as opposed to the rush job that happened this past year.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? Yes, please.
I'm Joe Dave. I've been in. No, I've been involved in this grader for one way or another since last May. And I'm focusing on, as Mr. Epstein pointed out today, what are we going to do today on? The Advisory Budget Committee did not recommend Article 3. And all of us participated in that discussion. We had very healthy debate, in-depth debate. And this is not an easy decision. It's a very complex issue. I was one who voted yes. And the reason I did, I've been running numbers on this grader for almost a year. We looked at options, leasing, buying, renting. I voted yes because this Article 3 is the lowest financial risk to the town. It's a done deal. We have the grader, the DPW is using it. It's $67,600 to make the lease payment, which we signed a legally binding contract to do in June, I believe it's due June 24th. The other options of invoking the escape clause, that is a very bad idea. It's going to hurt the town's credit rating, that type of thing. And again, Article 4, I actually voted against. I don't think we should take $410,000 out of the unassigned fund balance to pay off the grader and then try to sell it. As Mr. Rogerson's pointed out, we don't know the value. Who's going to buy it? There's a lot of risk there. So I went with the lowest risk option. We stick with the signed contract.
Thank you. And thank you for your research on this, Mr. Dame. Yes, sir.
Dave Kribbe, Heritage Road. So we're discussing using the unassigned fund balance to potentially be used on Article 4. My question is, one, when are we going to have the unassigned fund balance money that we're supposed to be getting from FEMA? When do we anticipate getting that to get our unassigned fund balance back up to where it needs to be? And number two, if we are considering doing what is called for in Article 4, why are we not considering saving the, I think, $70,000 in interest and using the same idea of let's pay it all off up front and save $70,000? If this is an option, why aren't we discussing that?
So two separate questions there. Do we have any feedback on the FEMA reimbursement timeframe?
We have received over 90% of the FEMA money. I think there's one job left standing, but there's two left standing, but we've received over $400,000, I believe, from FEMA to reimburse our unassigned fund balance.
So the money's there?
Yes.
Very quickly follow up then. So how much will we have left in unassigned fund balance after the potential of Article 4 if we were to purchase the grader outright?
I think unassigned fund balance would be about 900,000.
Yeah. So right now, I believe, without looking it up, we're right around 900,000. In order to do that, we would have to strike a line in Article 4 and buy the grader outright, which would leave us with roughly 500,000 in unassigned fund balance, which would put a detriment on what we would use to buy down taxes in October.
And what does DRA recommend that we have?
What's that? Sorry, I didn't hear.
Sorry. What does DRA recommend we have in our unassigned fund balance annually?
Roughly 400,000.
So thank you. So we're getting a little further afield here.
Can we move the question, Mr. Moderator?
We'll have the people who are in line standing speak first, but just Mr. Kribbe raises the issue of if we do pass Article 3 of using some of that unassigned fund balance to pay it off anyway and keep it as a means of ending the lease and ending the interest payments. Is that something you are considering? I thought that was his other question.
I would not personally consider it, no.
Okay. You just continue down the road of the lease. Okay. Yes, sir.
Jacob Martin, Hedgehog Hill Road.
Right up close to there, please.
How's this? Any better?
Yes.
All right. Jacob Martin, Hedgehog Hill Road. We've talked about this ad nauseum for months. I move to make a motion to move the question.
And I will accept that motion once the other person in line has had the opportunity to speak and any budget committee members who I didn't see. And then I'll accept the motion and we'll vote as to whether to end debate. Yes, please.
Hi, Sherry Stackpole. My only question is, if the grader passes, it's a pretty technical machine at this point. It's not just getting in and switching gears and stuff like that that you do. Would you guys consider providing training to the DPW so they can use it to the fullest capacity?
I mean, any training that is available would be utilized, but we do have a qualified operator for this particular machine right now.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. There's no doubt that the town needs a road grader. It needs a good quality road grader.
Pull the microphone a little closer,
Yes.
please.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no doubt that the town needs a road grader. We have all agreed to that. If you look at the Caterpillar website, there's two models of the 140. There's a standard model, and then there's the all-wheel drive Joy model, which is a much more highly sophisticated, more capable piece of equipment, and also a more expensive piece of equipment. That's what we have today. In my opinion, we have, I've shared this with the ABC, that there is much more at stake with this warrant Article 3 than just a road grader. A no vote today will clearly inform our elected officials from this day forward that transparency and utilizing our democratic process through this legislative body, as demonstrated today, are a must before signing any contracts for expensive equipment. How we vote today on this article will likely be a defining moment for our town. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll have a vote now as to...
I just have one question about, which one is the one paid off? Can you explain these? No, it's kind of like 4B.
hang on one second here. Thank you. Yeah, it is important that everybody understands what we're voting on and the differences and the impact on the town through Article 3 and Article 4. And I probably shouldn't be the one to do it, but Article 3 says we currently have a lease on a very nice piece of equipment, expensive piece of equipment that was entered into last spring. It's a 7-year lease. We pay $67,600 a year for that, and at the end we're going to own that thing. And Article 3 says, let's stick to that. The selectmen move forward independently of the rest of the town because of pressure to the other machine failing, and the result is in Article 3, that passes. We simply continue down the road of using that piece of equipment and continuing the lease that we entered into last spring. If we vote down Article 3, what Article 4 suggests is we take a hunk of money that the federal government gave us because of all our flood damage and everything. We take a hunk of money and we buy the thing, pay off the lease. So we own it. And what Article 4 says, let's get rid of it. Let's sell it. And people have made estimates that we're going to get a lot of money back for it. I think what you'll find is that if Article 3 is defeated and Article 4 passes, that there'll be a motion to add some money to Article 5 to lease a piece of equipment for the next 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. And you've heard the issues about leasing and so on. But that would be the intent. And then we would have the pile of money from selling the one we have now. We'd have that money and we could go shopping for another, perhaps more modest-sized grader. Those are really the two options, it sounds like to me. Number one is let's continue with the lease we have and keep the piece of equipment we have. Or number 4, we sell the piece of equipment we have, we spend a year or two hoping to rent pieces of equipment while we shop for another, probably smaller piece of equipment.
Mr. Moderator?
And if I've summarized that unfairly, please correct me. I'm happy to be corrected.
Sure, we don't have to lease for the next year. We can use the grader that we have while we spend a year looking for the right buyer and looking for a different grader.
Right, and we heard the issues around whether that, what the impact of that might be on the value of the grader before we sold it. And so, absolutely right. We might not have to rent. We might continue to use the grader we have and not sell it right away. Ma'am, I'm hoping I explained that adequately. You're wearing a Bartlett sweatshirt. I'm not happy about that. Go ahead.
I'm wondering why, like, where's the option where we take the FEMA money and keep it? So number one, we keep paying the interest. Number two, that's like taking a pit.
I'm sorry, so I'm going to stop you. You asked a specific question. If we vote in favor of Article 3, as I understand it, each year we would spend the $67,000 and pay off the lease, and the FEMA money would stay in the bank.
Right. If we defeat that and go to 4, then we're selling it back. We're selling it. And the baseball analogy, you trade in a player, you don't keep them in the game.
We weren't going to have another discussion. If you have any questions.
I do. My question is, where is the one we take the FEMA money and pay it, not the interest, not number 3?
That option would have to be an amendment to Article 4
Okay,
and its
thank
wording.
you. That's what I thought. So after 3 and 4, somebody could make an amendment.
When we get to 4, we could make.
Point of order, Mr. Moderator. The question's been moved, 1, and 2.
Yeah, I think I had. Did I have anyone else need to speak here? Okay, we're
Attorney
going to
Bolt has
vote
a
on whether to end debate. We're going to vote on whether to end debate because there was no one standing at that point in time. You clearly have additional people who have additional comments who would like to speak, but we have the opportunity to end debate. It's not debatable whether we, this particular item, and we need to have a 2/3 majority to end debate. So if you vote yes, we will stop debating and we will have a vote. If you vote no, we will continue the debate, at least for a little bit longer. All those in favor of ending debate on Article 3, please raise your hand. Thank you. All those opposed, please raise your hand. We have ended debate on Article 3. So we're ready to vote on Article 3. So I have a piece of paper. I need to have the people raise their hands to show they're physically present in the room who would like to have a secret ballot for Article 3. So please raise your hand if you'd like to have a secret ballot for Article 3. You don't even have to be on this list. If you'd like to have a secret ballot, please raise your hand. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Got plenty. Okay. So.
Can a motion be made before we vote?
Probably not. What would the motion be?
I might misunderstand what we're exactly voting on, but I don't see any debate on it.
Please hop up to the microphone. I'm going to consider this a point of order, and so I'm allowing him to interrupt the voting process. Yes.
I don't see anywhere that you can pay it off and keep it.
That's
it looks
what
like you can pay it off and sell it, but not pay it off and
we
keep
can
it.
discuss that under Article 4. So Article 3, that would not occur.
But how you vote on Article 3 might depend on if that's an amendment
And we
motion.
don't know how people
You
will
can't.
ultimately vote on that topic.
You can't? You have to wait?
Mr. Moderator, the Attorney Bolt has a
Go
concern.
ahead, Mr. Bolt.
Sorry, Mr. Moderator.
No, that's quite all right.
Are we there now?
Closer to your mouth.
Seldom have I been accused of being quiet and demure. Article 4 as written says you will sell. I am concerned if you try to amend from the floor to eliminate that sentence, because it is not a dollar amount change, it is a substantive resolution change that DRA may disallow that vote.
And DRA, as the moderator has pointed out in the past, are satanic devil worshippers whose only goal in life is to disrupt the power and authority of our town meetings. In this particular
nor
case,
deny I've ever been.
What's that? What's that?
I can neither confirm nor deny.
Okay, fair enough. No, he's got to get along with them. Moderator trainings in the past have been very encouraging of towns, as long as the general topic of what we're going to do about a road grader was the topic at hand of being able to be free to do exactly the kind of thing, paying off the lease and so on, and changing that sentence. We've been trained that that was perfectly okay in the past. In recent years, because DRA has gotten more aggressive and the people in Concord think they should be running our towns, that's a political opinion, we have been warned, as Attorney Bolt has appropriately warned us, that there could be a danger of that not being approved by the state. But we're not there yet. We have to vote on Article 3 first. I recognize it could change, but we don't know how Article 4 would come out. In any case, we don't know whether people would favor paying it off or not paying it off. That's a separate discussion, and we're not going to know the answer to that. So we're going to vote on Article 3, which is pretty much straight up. Do we want to continue down the road that was started by the signing of the lease last spring and continue down that road going forward, with the potential, not just this year, but the year after, of potentially paying off the lease if we so chose? But Article 3 is what we're voting on right now. We're going to vote by secret ballot. And so if you would take out your little card, you take out your little card, you see the little letter A on the bottom left-hand corner. What you do is you tear out just the letter A, and you tear it in half. There's a yes or a no, and you tear those two things apart so that you're left with either a yes or a no. You are either in favor under Article 3 of approving the lease that was entered into last spring, or you're not in favor of continuing that lease that was entered into last spring. Yes or no? Does anyone not understand what they're voting on or how the vote should be done? Seeing none, we'll take 5 minutes, and you are free to use the box on that side or the box on that side. There's a table on either side of the room, and the moderator will go to the men's room.
What's up? Huh? Yes, no, I agree. And the reason I was only one of two people on the budget committee because I didn't want to spend $410,000, you know, that we used to pay down the taxes. It was a dumb idea. And we don't want to return a grader to the company because it ruins the town's credit. It's like having a car repossessed or falling, not paying your mortgage. You know, all three selectmen voted for this, and it was approved at that meeting that I was at. You know, we signed a contract. We should stick with it. It's the lowest cost option. If we get this FEMA money, we get this. No, I know. The lowest cost is to pay the $67,000 because we owe it already for the year we've used it. So we get another year. And they're using the grader every day. They're out doing the roads now, and the roads have never been better. Oh, I know, but again, you know, Mr. Epstein, we can't get into the past, and I agree. I don't like the process, but we need the grader, and this is the lowest risk cost to the town. Yes. Plus, I saved $100,000 for the town on health insurance this year. You know, we went to a new plan. So that money more than pays for the grader. They know, but yeah, you know, nobody brought that up. So the cost savings I did pays for the grader.
yourself? This is good. Keep it that way. I don't do family life. All the best to you. There are certain things. Thank you. Just the right tone. Calling the meeting back to order. Is there anyone who has not yet voted? Who has not yet voted? Then I will ask Becky and company to gather up the ballots. Ms. Brooks helping, and for you folks to take the lead in doing the count and bringing it up to me as soon as you have it available. I do not know how to go on to Article 4 without having the results of Article 3. So in the interest of moving things along and knowing that Article 5 could be influenced as well, I'm going to jump to Article 6. At moderator discretion, we're going to go to Article 6. And then we'll be back to the grader in a few minutes. Article 6, see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $668,102 for public safety. Do I have a motion and a second from our Board of Selectmen? I do, thank you. Board of Selectmen, do you want to speak to this at all, or should I just barrel right into it?
I'm not on. I'd just like to note that there was a decrease from last year over the approved amount.
I'm sorry, say that again?
There was a decrease in that portion of the budget over last year.
Correct. Thank you. You mean over the approved budget?
Yes.
Questions or comments on Article 6? Public safety, ambulance, emergency management, fire and rescue, and police. Chief is here in uniform. Happy to answer any questions. Seeing none, we will vote on Article 6. All those in favor of Article 6 and expending $668,102 for public safety, please raise your hand. Thank you. All those opposed, please raise your hand. Article 6 passes without amendment. Article 7, which could initiate some debate, but I think we should keep moving. So, Article 7, see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $400,000 for paving and road improvements of town roads, including, but not limited to, Town Line, Forest Pines, Pine Hill, and Jones Hill roads. This will be a non-lapsing appropriation per RSA 3276 and will not lapse until the funds have been exhausted with the completion of the project or by December 31, 2030, whichever is sooner. Do I have a motion and a second from the board? Thank you. Just a note that the town has moved forward with more and more of these non-lapsing appropriations. In the past, appropriation would typically fall into one of two categories. Either you spend it this year, and if you don't spend it all, you give it back to the town and it comes back in reduced taxes. Or it goes into a capital reserve fund, for example, and then would come back for a vote of the people. This is a non-lapsing thing that lasts until 2030. So if you can't get it all done, you can't spend the whole 400 grand during the fiscal year, they can continue to use that money until it's all used up and the jobs get done. So that's the purpose of this kind of format. Are there any questions or comments with regard to Article 7 or amendments to Article 7? I'm not going to argue. Whoop, we do have something. Okay.
Donna Vayu again. Could I ask the Budget Committee to comment on their vote, please?
Notice that a tie results in a not recommended category. Go ahead, please.
So obviously, as you look at the vote, we were fairly split on this. We all recognize the need to keep our roads up to current standards and be passable and roadworthy. The issue for us was the amount, the dollar amount. We recognize that the selectmen had already taken $100,000 out of this warrant article before it ever came to publication in order to address the high amount. One of the concerns that the Budget Committee had is that $400,000 was based on a single organization's estimate, and the road priority list that we were using was at least 5 or 6 years old, had not been updated, and so we had concerns of, are these the correct roads to be doing in this order? And what other analysis had been done. And for what we understood, we didn't have any of that current information to make the decision on.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? Yes, sir.
Ned Rogerson and Woodland Road. When I was on the Budget Committee way back when, we had $100,000 in the budget for roads, and the Budget Committee at that point thought that was a little bit low and talked to selectmen. Selectmen said, yeah, we have a list of the roads we're going to do. We got it all out. And this was said for numerous years, but the list was never provided to anybody. And so I would like to see in the future that the Budget Committee actually gets the list and that we talk about it a little bit, because nobody knows what's on that list or the timing. Suddenly, we went up to 200, and now we're trying to do 400. It doesn't sound as if there's a real list and a real thought process that's been followed over the years. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Moderator, can I answer that for you?
Sure.
To be clear, there is a list. The list, however, is several years old. It's categorized as red, yellow, or green. I think there's also a blue color on that. Red roads, obviously, are ones that are in need of attention imminently. And then the yellow are the next in concern, and green, so on and so on. Again, we had that list. We were looking at that list. The problem is, we don't believe, nor did we get evidence to show us to the contrary, that that list had been updated in several years as from a priority standpoint, and understanding what that red, yellow, and green category actually meant. Were there ones that are orange instead of red? That kind of thing.
Thank you. Mr. Forrest?
Yes, thank you. Yes, we've also spent considerable time reviewing this warrant article and talking to the town. But I would like, as a independent taxpayer, separate from the Budget Committee, to make a motion to reduce this warrant article from $400,000 to $325,000. And right after that, I'd like to give reasons why.
You got it. So, I'm sorry. So from 400,000 to 325,000 is the number you prefer. You're making that motion as an individual, not representing or speaking for the Budget Committee.
Correct.
Mr. Forrest asked if he should stand up here to make that motion. I told him no, we don't have to waste the time. So just so you understand, he is making it as an individual, 325,000. So is there a second to Mr. Forrest's motion? Have a second. Your name again, ma'am? Carol Penza is the second. Mr. Forrest, you want to explain rationale?
Yes, briefly, please. The proposed $400,000 represents a 60% increase in this article from 2024. This article was approved by voters for $250,000 in 2024 and $200,000 in 2023. This recommended $325,000 amount still represents a 30% increase from 2024 because we recognize the cost of materials have gone up. And this increase is part of a 12% increase in the total town budget as being proposed by our selectmen. Our road improvement plan and associated costs every year must still be affordable to our taxpayers despite significant road improvements and cost increases. And as our chair just mentioned, we only received one bid, so we're not really sure that this is an accurate statement of actual costs. So its accuracy is very, very questionable. I propose we designate 2025 as a transition year to develop a more accurate, long-term revolving road plan. And more importantly, this long-term revolving plan, if managed properly, should be significantly more accurate in determining the costs of this important warrant article every year. And once these validated costs are determined, our legislative body needs to support that warrant article. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just ask a quick question?
No.
Okay.
Yes.
Sorry about the 50 years, George. Steve Dudley. My question is this way first.
Okay.
How much does the state give us for TRA money?
What's TRA?
Town Road Assistance money.
And give her a second. Do you have another question you'd like to ask?
No, but I'll agree with the gentleman that brought up the change on it, because my point was to take the TRA money and put it against the 400,000.
Understood. Just so
No, this is for paved roads.
Wow, the grader will shoulder those paved roads.
So wouldn't the town money, excuse me, wouldn't the state support for our town roads would be revenue that offsets some of this expenditure? Is that an accurate statement?
Yes, it goes into the general fund.
Yeah, it comes to the general fund, but you don't, dollars are fungible. You put them in and you use them as you see fit. It's not the dollar from the state that pays for Mooney Hills asphalt here. It is money coming into the town, and then we're making the decision as to how much money to spend going out. Yes.
Hi. I have a list of roads from the DPW, as Sharon Schilling described. In a budget committee meeting, we went through and we tried to kind of rough estimate numbers to update. This year's estimate as to what the DPW requested that we prioritize is about $378,000, so that $400,000. The $100,000 that Selectman Aruda proposed to remove was to top coat Mooney Hill Road, so that has been put off to save $100,000 this year. But looking at next year's and the red priority roads, the estimate for adding all of those up that would be carried over to next year, again, rough estimates that we were trying to come up with in the meeting on the spot, was about $933,000. So we need to be not delaying things. We need to be setting aside money to do these things in the future. Can we do all 933 next year? Probably not. But I don't think that reducing this warrant article this year is the right thing to do, because we're just kicking cans down the road that we're going to have to pay. And in the meantime, we have potholes and unsafe roads
Thank you.
while we're trying to repair them.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, now,
Thank you.
please.
I'm just curious when that list was updated. Josh, can you let us know when you updated that list for us?
It was something that I inherited, so it was updated within the last year, within this last.
Okay, so it was updated within the last year. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Linda, do you have an answer? For that?
I have that answer, George, and that answer is approximately 103,000.
103.
Yes.
Thank you. It comes from the state in support of our roads. Yes, sir.
Joe Damigan. Hey, the Budget Committee did discuss this at length, and it was not recommended by the Advisory Budget Committee. But me being the outlier again, I voted yes. And the reason I did, back in November 6th, I got drawn into this. My problem is I say yes too quickly. Hey, can you go take a look at this? And I did. And I do a lot of research, and I run a lot of numbers. I do a lot of spreadsheets. I went over to the DPW. I met with Josh Shackford and Justin Chick, and we went over the list for this year. Josh had received a price quote. Again, as Ron pointed out, we only have one price, kind of to give us a ballpark. And I actually went out and I drove the roads, and I looked at the roads. And the roads actually on the list this year are Forest Pines Road, Forest Pines Extension, Jones Hill Road, Pine Hill Road, Mooney Hill Road, and Town Line Road. And Town Line Road is awful. It hasn't been done since 2007, I believe. And again, I'm not a paving expert, and I don't pretend to be one, but I am a 35-year project manager, and I know how to run budgets and schedules and look at costs. I actually went to the Federal Highway Administration website to find out what it costs to build a road. And the costs have increased 54% since the first quarter of 2023 from the fourth quarter of 2020. And it's driven by the cost of materials, labor expenses, transportation costs, and heightened demand for paving services. So again, as it's been pointed out, our last year was $250K, $200K prior. You know, with these price increases, we're getting less road for that money. The prices, it did come out to almost $500,000. It went to the Board of Selectmen. I went to the meeting. Mr. Aruda, they took off the top coat on Mooney Hill Road because it's brand new, the base coat. But the other roads are all red, and they need to be done. Forest Pines, the cost is $172,000. That's for almost a mile of road. They're going to grind 12 sections and redo it. The extension's about 600 feet. Cost is $20,000. Jones Hill is $60,000 to do 2,200 feet of road. Pine Hill is 1,600 feet of road at $50,000. The Mooney Hill quote was $111,000. That was 5,400 feet of road, 22 feet wide.
Please wrap things up pretty quickly.
And the last was Town Line Road, 1,600 feet for $80,000. And I voted for that because the longer we delay, the higher cost, as Selectman Gray pointed out.
Thank you.
You know, these things are getting very expensive.
Thank you. Other comments or questions on the amendment to reduce the amount in Article 7 from $400,000 to $325,000? I wrote that down correctly, didn't I? $325,000. If there's no further discussion, we will vote on the amendment. On the amendment, do you favor reducing the dollar amount in Article 7 from $400,000 to $325,000? Please raise your hand if you do favor the reduction to $325,000. Thank you. All those opposed to the amendment? Thank you. The amendment's defeated, so we're back to we're back to $400,000 in Article 7. Is there any final discussion on Article 7? Go ahead.
I can make another amendment.
Yes.
I'd like to amend the figure to $375,000.
$375,000. So I have a motion to amend the dollar amount down from $400,000 to $375,000. Do I have a second to that motion? I do. Thank you. Shout out your name, please. Mary Lucy. If there's no discussion, we will vote on that amendment to reduce the dollar amount from $400,000 to $375,000. All those in favor of that amendment, please raise your hand. Thank you. All those opposed to that amendment? Thank you. So that's also defeated. And we are back to the $400,000. If there's no further discussion, we'll vote on Article 7 to see if town vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $400,000 for paving and road improvements of town roads, including but not limited to Town Line, Forest Pines, Pine Hill, and Jones Hill roads. This will be a non-lapsing appropriation per RSA 3276. Will not lapse until the funds have been exhausted with the completion of the project or by December 31st, 2030, whichever is sooner. All those in favor of Article 7 as written in the book, please raise your hand. Thank you. All those opposed, please raise your hand. Thank you. The article passes as written in the book. We're back to Article 3. The results of Article 3 are as follows. Yes votes, 130. No votes, 39. 130 yes, no votes, 39. And so Article 3 passes, and the town has chosen to ratify the 7-year lease that was entered into last spring. Article 4, to be acted upon only if Article 3 passes, and I could just whiz over it. I don't like doing that, and I don't think that's appropriate, and I'm not even going to ask the lawyer. You've been warned that there is an Article 4 in there, so I'm going to ask for a motion to move over Article 4. Seconded, thank you. All those, any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor of moving past Article 4, please raise your hand. Thank you. All those opposed, please. Thank you. The issue of paying off the lease to avoid interest payments is kind of an interesting question and is always an open question. Because we don't have anything, I think is, in this case, DRA would be grouchy. Because we don't have anything that is very specific to achieving that on this warrant, we've not been adequately warned. We can't really address that this year, but we certainly could next year if we wanted to avoid the remaining lease payments for the remaining 5 years or whatever it is of that lease. So certainly that would be an option if people wanted to have that discussion next year. And that's true of all the funds that we borrow. And so we're up to Article 5. See if town votes to raise and appropriate the sum of $1,019,041 for public works. Moved and seconded by selectmen. Yes and yes. Thank you. Excuse me. Discussion about Article 5, the highway budget, the Parks and Rec portion, the solid waste, and administration. And is it accurate to say the rec budget in the first budget we voted on is sort of the staffing and the delivery of the programs, whereas Parks and Rec under this category are taking care of the facilities?
Correct.
Fields. Any discussions with regard to Article 5, amendments, or anything else?
Mr. Moderator?
Yes.
I voted not to recommend Article 5. It contains an addition of $70,000 for a position that was created in fall of last year that I also voted against. It wasn't in the budget, and as you can see, it's not in the budget for next year. We're looking to add $70,000 for a position that didn't exist last year.
You're referring, I'm sorry. And so?
So I guess I will make a motion to reduce the DPW budget by $69,740.
$69,740. Excuse me, and that falls under the administration line item.
Correct.
Correct. And I'm going to ask someone here to give me the bottom line number and how the $1,019,000 would change. The number is $69,740 that's proposed to reduce the administration line. And we're going to talk about it in just a minute. Yes?
$949,301.
$949,301.
And just as a clarification, as with Mr. Force's motion, this is a motion by a citizen, not a motion from the board.
Thank you. Is motion from an individual select person. Do we have a second for that amendment? I do, also from Ms. Lucy. Ms. Gray, would you care to provide some explanation or more explanation?
Yes, so in the fall, am I a selectman or am I an individual? I guess as an individual, I was aware of a position that was, that did not exist, that was not in the budget, that was brought to the select board to add without being explained as necessary. It wasn't in the budget. It wasn't justified in my mind. So as a selectman, I voted no to create the position and add a hire because it was presented all at once.
Do you want to explain what the position is?
At first, it was referenced as a highway technician. It was advertised for one day as a CDL driver. So again, it was confusion that it was initially presented as highway technician, and then it was advertised differently, and it was advertised for one day on a Saturday, and with resumes due by the following Thursday. So I didn't feel that that was sufficient time to actually put it out and look to hire multiple individuals, look to receive multiple resumes.
Thank you.
Just a point of clarification, it was in the paper for only one day, but it was noted on the website and the board for multiple weeks.
Thank you. Yes.
Clarification on the motion, is it because you are opposed to having a fully staffed DPW, or you're opposed to the way that staffing happened?
My understanding was at the beginning of the year we were fully staffed, and there were no additional needs at the time to increase the staff.
Okay, but the DPW director decided that, the DPW director that the selectman hired decided that, yes, another position is needed? Just for clarification.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
I guess I would disagree, but I don't know how much I can discuss that was in a non-public.
We would never and should never discuss an individual employee or their characteristics or their work performance. Any of that, I think, is clearly inappropriate for the meeting. But we voted a budget last year for the DPW for, with a certain staffing assumed. There was a change requested, I guess, by the DPW director during the year, and action was taken by the selectmen to authorize the hiring to occur. And now we have additional position, and we have the opportunity to provide feedback to the selectmen about whether that position should have been filled and whether we continue to support an additional position. So it's about a position, it's not about a person. Yes.
I just need some clarification. Linda Haver. I was at another meeting where I believe, Adam, I asked you, I asked the select chair if the DPW person in charge, which I'm thinking is the position you're talking about, but I don't know, was full-time or part-time, because it seemed like it needed to be a full-time position. And I was told that you made it part-time to save the town money. So I'm just, is this the position we're talking, what
No.
are we
No, it's
talking
not.
about?
No.
Okay, all right, I just need to understand.
Thank you. If nobody used the word clarification for the rest of the meeting, I'd be okay with that. Yes.
Good morning, Mr.
Would you like a
Moderator.
clarification to anything, Mr. Bergeron?
Clarification as to what's going on. Thank you. Sean Bergeron, Forest
Pick
Pines
your, yeah. She's going to keep after you guys.
Thank you. Sean Bergeron, Forest Pines Road. We keep speaking of the Public Works Director, a DPW Director, like in the third person like that. He's not even present. What might help is if the DPW Director explains the position and the need for the position.
Thank you.
I can't tell if that round
Mr.
of
Milliken, would you like to defer to the DPW Director? I thought you might. Yes, sir.
So this is the staff that,
And you'll
I'm
introduce
Josh
yourself.
Shackford,
Thank you.
East Madison Road.
And you have a position with the town.
I'm the Director of Public Works. Correct.
Terrific, thank you.
So we had this much staffing that we currently have now 4 or 5 years ago, and it was just getting back up to staff, and I was just getting my feet wet and had just started the position and thought we would had enough employees to cover everything and drive all the trucks, and we didn't, and an opportunity came along to actually, I know we're talking about a position, but we are also talking about an individual. So the issue I have with this is we are up to staff now, and I've got a good crew, and we would have to lay somebody off if this passed. So
thank you.
There's more to it than just a position.
I understood it has an impact on people, but you understand the meeting, we don't want to deal with individual staff people.
Mr. Moderator,
Yes.
Todd Milliken, Route 41, Plains Road. And I'm not sure this is an appropriate time for this question, but as my high school math teacher, I think you'll address that. In this budget, it looks like administration is 60% of the budget. And I was wondering, historically or geographically, is that a normal thing that it would take 60% of the budget to administer Department of Public Works?
How many of what percentage, very rough number, of the administration line consists of people who do work, who do stuff on our roads, of the 600 grand? Yeah, I mean, I guess you're not talking about people who are sitting there in front of a computer typing in road plans.
I'm actually just wondering if town to town, county to county, is this a normal percentage? Like, it seems like there could be...
You got it wrong.
Yeah.
It's the way that the state has the accounting structure set up. These are not administrators. This is not administration. This is the performance of the work, administering the tasks of maintaining the roads. It's a very unfair, it's not a very good word to use for that line item. It's very inaccurate.
Mr. Moderator?
Is that fair?
Well, I have the DPW administration, it has 5 lines specifically for salaries. The total DPW salaries proposed for this year are $555,240. That's an increase of $56,140 from last year because some money was taken out of part-time labor seasonal budget line.
Thank you, but is there a full-time clerical staff that's sitting around doing administration? No, there's none of that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And my last question, this is the one where it may not be...
He wasn't a great math student, I'm just saying.
Yeah, but I think I got the 60% close because it was so easy to do.
That was good. That was good.
And I wondered if that line included the fleet manager and if there was a brief discussion or a description of that position. What does a fleet manager do, and is it in this administration line?
Good question. Thank you.
It is in that line, and that fleet manager maintains the maintenance on all our equipment. We use a system that's called iWork, right? And he's trained in that new system in maintaining our equipment and our maintenance schedules and those sorts of things.
Does he do actual maintenance work?
He does.
And this is a legacy position. We've always had this kind of position.
To the best of my knowledge. I've only been here 2 years, so.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Thank you.
In this seat.
Okay, so we have an amendment on the floor to reduce the number in Article 5 from $1,019,041 to $949,301 with the position that was added during the fiscal year as the primary one. My alarm went off. I don't know who talked too much, but I'm going to keep going. So it was me. Yeah, no, that was good. Yeah, I'm looking at the clock too. Okay, so Article 5 we are ready to vote on the amendment to reduce the dollar amount from $1,019,041 to $949,301 with this particular CDL driver position as the position that the town suggests they do not wish to proceed with. So we'll have a vote. If you vote yes, you want to eliminate the position and eliminate the $69,740. If you vote no, you want to leave the budget as has been proposed
Mr.
in
Moderator,
your book.
I
Yes.
did not propose eliminating a position.
So you don't want to send any direction to the selectmen yourselves as to how that cut should be made. You're leaving that open to the board.
Yes.
Okay, then I won't present it that way. And that's important because they would respond to your vote. So if you are in favor of reducing the budget by $69,740, please raise your hand. Reducing the budget by that amount. Thank you. If you're opposed to reducing it by that amount, I believe the nays have it. Anybody disagree? If not, the amendment is defeated. And we are back to $1,019,041 for Article 5. If there's no further discussion, see if town votes to raise and appropriate the sum of $1,019,041 for public works. All those in favor of that article, please raise your hand. Thank you. All those opposed, please raise your hand. Motion passes. Okay. Article 8. We're flying now. To see if town vote to authorize selectmen to enter into a 5-year lease purchase agreement in the amount of $63,000 for the purpose of leasing an outfitted police cruiser and to raise and appropriate $14,350 for the first year's payment for that purpose. This lease agreement contains an escape clause, and the town will own the police cruiser at the end of 5 years. Moved and seconded. Thank you. By the selectmen. Anybody wish to speak to this? Go ahead first, Ms. Gray.
Hi, I just wanted to check in with our police chief. I know he was considering whether or not this was necessary for this year.
Thank you. Please.
Jim Hayford, Chief of Police. A point of order, I'm not a resident of Madison. I live in Center Hospi.
He's authorized. Anybody object? No. He is armed. Yeah.
Thank you. So back in February, when I spoke before the Budget Committee and the Selectmen's Board, I did mention that staffing was a concern of mine. Why have 4 cars if I don't have 4 full-time officers? I'm happy to report, just as I was concerned at the time, we haven't had a 4th officer for almost 2 years now. I do have a fairly healthy pool of candidates at this time, and I'm quite hopeful I'll have an officer on the road by the end of this year. Yeah, having a 4th car would be extremely important for me this year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
Yes.
I was just going to ask if Chief Hayford could come forward to speak. So.
Okay. Well, no, not again. I'm sorry. Great unanimity here, though. Any other discussion with regard to Article 8?
Hope Hutchinson, Pitt Road, Silver Lake. Question for the chief. Will you wait on this purchase until you have a 4th officer, a 4th full-time officer?
Thank you.
So it's a good question. Timing is fairly important with these. The bids go out, we try to acquire these vehicles through the state bids. They opened up these bids at the beginning of last year in November. So if I try to wait on this purchase, I may not be able to get a vehicle until the next November, or this year's November, which quite potentially could put this vehicle in a higher cost to the town.
So following the state's pattern, when would you actually enter into an agreement to make a purchase?
next week if it's approved.
Gotcha.
Yep. And then also too, acquiring equipment for these vehicles takes several months. Purchasing this, if I get this vehicle, say next week, I may not see it until the end of the summer. It's a very undetermined amount of time, as well as sourcing all the equipment that I'll need to put into it. It does take some time. Every other municipality in the state is also trying to get a vehicle. Not every single municipality, but many are. So getting in line, so to speak, to get this car into a place that equips them is important too. Just don't want to be at the end of the line at the end of the year.
Thank you.
Appreciate planning ahead. Thank you, Chief.
Hi, Barbara Rockwell, Colby Hill. Question for the chief. I'd be interested to know what the coverage is with 3 versus 4 officers. And the time of day.
Another very good question. Many towns around us are seeing shortages just like we have, including state police, the sheriff's office. Many don't know that the state police in Troopy and Tamworth they're not a dozen badges short of full staff, but there are many, many shortages to the point where we don't receive after hours coverage from them. So for after 11 p.m. at night, when our officers are on call, I'm in Ossipee. I have one officer in Madison, another officer in Wolfboro. If there is no state police on the road, no sheriff's department, they don't really cover for us, then the call comes to us. We've been good to the point where we've been fairly proactive as a department for the last 2 years, given that we've been being shorthanded. I do have part-timers. They're not always guaranteed to work part-time for me. They work part-time for other municipalities as well. We're getting to the point now where we're very reactive. If you look in my statistics for last year, our numbers for motor vehicle have dropped. Numbers for arrests have dropped. That doesn't mean that we have less crime. That just means that officers aren't on the road being proactive to find those arrests. If I do get this officer, I'm able to put another officer and cover more hours. So right now I don't have an officer on the road until noontime. She comes out and covers up till 10 o'clock tonight. I'm still on call. I think it's very important. We want to be proactive. We want to be able to respond timely in the event that there are no other agencies that are going to be able to respond. Timely reporting, timely responding is very important.
Thank you. Yes.
Hi, Melissa LaRoche from Plains Road. Quick question. Do we ever have 3 or 4 police officers on duty at the same time?
Thank you. Chief?
So I'll be 18 years here in this August. Sometimes we do have 4 on duty. There are many times when I have 3 on duty. It may be only for an hour or so during transitions, during shift change, depending on the day of the week. A lot of our investigations are more time consuming. They're not investigations that we're actively out investigating at a certain location. We spend a significant amount of time in the office doing digital investigations for phones. A lot of our felonies, we've done search warrants on phones, computers, all these different things. It's a different era of policing. I can spend 8 hours a day in the office while I'm responding to other calls. It's important, to have another officer to be able to respond to calls in the middle of the day sometimes. I do have a sergeant who has taken on some prosecutorial duties, but also having that other officer just to patrol during the daytime. There's a lot of times where we have emergencies in town. We may not need an officer at all times of the day, but to get good coverage from 7 a.m. in the morning till 11 o'clock at night, 7 days a week, we do require 4 officers. It's just, I have 1 officer today, 1 officer's on tomorrow. We try to cover the highest amount of calls per day. It's not always at nighttime, but it ebbs and flows. So, but no, we're never on 4. It's very rare.
Yeah, Mr. Arruda?
I just want to make a comment. Unfortunately, over the last couple of years, I've had to use rescue at my house. The very first person through the door is a police officer. It is comforting to know that they're there when you need them, and they're not searching for a vehicle. That we got 4 officers, we have 4 vehicles, and when you pick up that phone and you dial 911, they're there.
Thank you, Mr. Arruda. I'm not sure I've ever seen more people nod their head at once in here, except for after he said, yes.
I'm sorry, I guess I did not phrase my question properly. I was asking, do we use all 4 vehicles at the same time?
Gotcha.
Was more my question. Sorry.
It's rare. So occasionally, some days we do have 2 officers on. Tuesdays is a busy day for us. We have court. We need to patrol, responding to calls for service. There are other times officers are going to be out of the area for training. A big part of my budget this year is an increase on training hours from 16 to 24 hours. A lot of this is not in town. We need to travel. The model where we moved to 4 cars was fairly recent during the previous chief. In years past, and I can say this because I've been the guy patrolling most of the time, 3 vehicles shared between 4 officers, it's doable. When you have 2 patrolmen sharing a vehicle, they are not only patrolling the road with that 1 car between the hours of 7 a.m. to midnight sometimes. In the summer, it could be longer. The car is on the road all day long and usually idling, which bumps up the hours. We don't have officers that live in town. A lot of times during that time when we had to relay cars around, that patrolman, for instance, I was riding to Effingham to rotate a car with the oncoming officer. So we're out of town for about an hour relaying these cars around. And we do that because we take call from home. For an officer to drive to the PD to pick a vehicle up, you're eliminating that service that we're providing. So you get up to 100,000 miles in 5 to 6 years. The vehicle is getting beat on. We drive the car from 0 to 80 miles an hour sometimes like that. It's hard on transmissions. It's hard on the vehicle itself, suspensions. The costs associated with that increase substantially to the point where you're repairing it quicker, and there's bigger costs associated with replacing things, the maintenance, the fuel. In the last year, I've driven the Dodge Charger that we had, not the last year, the last 5 years, going on 6 years. I've put 80,000 miles on it for a vehicle that normally we would keep for 6 years. We're extending the time of keeping that vehicle out to 8 years, and I think that's something we can do. That officer takes better care of the vehicle. They're a little easier on it. It's seeing less miles. I think you're getting a better value as opposed to us sharing cars and beating on them, or not beating on them, but we're hard on them. It's a police car. We drive 80, 90 miles an hour across Plains Road where you may drive 30. So,
Not all of us, no.
Mr. Moderator,
Thank you.
I have a question for the chief. We had 4 vehicles up until this year, or up until 2024.
Yes.
Can you explain, and I know it was under your predecessor, can you explain why we got rid of that 4th vehicle?
So that vehicle was, the K9 pickup truck we had. It wasn't a police car, it was a work pickup truck. At the time when the department began that K9 program, that was basically the only vehicle they could put into service that was that they could find. We were letting the patrolman use it. I ran it a few times. It's just not, it's not desirable or safe per se for police work. It's a truck with an 8-foot work bed on it. Try turning that vehicle around on a car you're trying to chase down. It's just not easy. We didn't have a dog, so you look at the back of this vehicle.
Thank you.
It's
Thank you.
yeah. So we
could
we
have
did
started
sell it.
with we didn't have a dog.
Yeah.
That would have done. All right, we're going to vote on Article 8, unless somebody can't bear to pass up. We don't hate dogs. Everybody likes dogs. Okay. To see if the town will vote to authorize selectmen to enter into a 5-year lease purchase agreement in the amount of $63,000 for the purpose of leasing an outfitted police cruiser and to raise and appropriate $14,350 excuse me, for the first year's payment for that purpose. This lease agreement contains an escape clause, and the town will own the police cruiser at the end of the 5 years. All those in favor of Article 8, please raise your hand. Thank you. All those opposed? Thank you. Article 8 passes. Article 9, see if town will vote, raise and appropriate a sum of $17,000 for the upgrading of the library entrance door to be ADA compliant. Moved and seconded by Selectmen. Thank you. Ms. Jarrell.
Hi, Sloan Jarrell, Library Director and Pound Road resident. I'd like to lower this to $7,000. The library received a $10,000 grant from ALA.
Okay, so it's not that simple. Before you leave, I'll check with the attorney on this. We're going to spend or need to spend about $17,000 to do the work.
Right.
But we have $10,000 in offsetting revenue.
Correct.
So it may be appropriate, and the Department of Revenue Administration wants to know how much you're spending on the project. They don't care about the revenue. So we probably have to leave it at $17,000, knowing that only $7,000 of it, approximately, will come from taxation. Wouldn't you suggest we not make that amendment, Mr. Attorney?
You can do it one of two ways. You can leave it as it is, or you can amend it, keeping the dollar amount where $10,000 is coming from a specified grant source,
right,
you know of, and $7,000 from taxation.
Right. So I'd leave it alone, because we all know we're going to get the 10 grand. That's terrific. It's only going to be 7,000. Do we need to write that all into the article? Does anybody care?
Mr. Moderator, I do. I think for transparency, for the taxpayers' sake, and in years to come, when we're looking back at this, that we do amend it to indicate that $10,000 is coming from a grant and $7,000 from taxpayer.
So I would suggest that $10,000, that we have an additional sentence. It says $10,000 will be coming from grant sources and $7,000 from taxation. Does that sound okay, Mr. Attorney?
My apologies, I was getting another question.
Okay. I would add this.
Let me ask a question. Is the grant already received or about to be received for that specific purpose?
Yes, I haven't received the check yet, but it has been approved.
Okay. And so that is from a particularly named source, correct?
American Library Association.
American Library Association would be what we put in to it. And that way, when the grant comes in, you have it.
So we want to add a sentence to Article 9 that says $10,000 of which $10,000 of funding will come from the American Library Association and $7,000 from taxation. Would that be an acceptable second sentence? Okay, so would you make that motion?
I make that motion.
And is there a second to that motion? Yes. Ms. Lucy, let's get her in there as much as possible today. So now the article reads, to see if town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $17,000 for the upgrading of the library entrance door to be ADA compliant, $10,000 of which will come from the American Library Association and $7,000 from taxation. Is there any further discussion on Article 9? Seeing none, we will vote. All those in favor of Article 9 as amended. I'm sorry, stop. Cancel the whole thing. We have to first vote for the amendment. So all those in favor of adding the second sentence as I just read, please raise your hand. Thank you. All those opposed? Thank you. And so now we will vote on Article 9 as amended. All those in favor of Article 9 as amended? Thank you. All those opposed? Thank you. Article 9 passes as amended. $10,000 grant. Good. Thank you. 10, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $2,500 as an annual stipend per RSA 3135 for the compensation of the trustee of the trust fund's bookkeeper. Moved and seconded by the selectmen. Is there any reason for this new appropriation?
Other than the fact that there hasn't been a stipend in the past, and it's a position that we see needs one.
Okay. And after and if the town approves this year, you would anticipate adding it to the general operating budget in the future?
That is correct.
Okay. So this is your shot at challenging this, if you so choose, this stipend. Is there any discussion or question or amendment? Seeing none, we'll vote on Article 10. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $2,500 as an annual stipend per RSA 3135 for the compensation of the trustee of the trust fund's bookkeeper. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. All those opposed? Article passes. Article 11, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $20,000 to be placed in the previously established Highway Heavy Equipment Expendable Trust Fund. They're moved and seconded by the selectmen. Article 11, is there any discussion or question with regard to this?
Mr. Moderator?
Yes.
I know that the DPW that this belongs to was planning on making, or had some high priority purchases that they're thinking about for next year. I believe there's one, if not two trucks and a chipper. So I didn't know if the DPW director was still here to confirm purchases that we need, that we are planning next year, and how much we should be setting aside to put down towards leases and avoid interest.
Seeing not, Josh is...
He left.
He left. Is it part of the capital improvement plan, those expenditures in the coming year?
They have been added. We have, the capital improvement plan is in draft mode, and we do have those purchases on the plan.
It's fair to say we have plenty to spend in the future if we choose to put aside this $20,000. It won't just sit there.
Yes, correct. And I believe we only currently have 23,000 in it. We put 10,000 in last year on top of 13, so that would put us up to about 43.
Thank you. Any further discussion or comments? Seeing none, we'll vote on Article 11. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $20,000 to be placed in the previously established Highway Heavy Equipment Expendable Trust Fund. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed? Article passes. Move to Article 12. See if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $10,000 to be placed in the previously established Transfer Station Capital Projects Expendable Trust Fund. Move seconded. Thank you, Selectmen. Any discussion or question in regard to the transfer station contribution?
Steve Bartlett, can we find out what are in these trust funds before we vote, please?
It's in your book.
It's in the book.
It is in the book?
Point us to a page.
I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. It's a big
Page
book.
171.
171. The book has gotten bigger every year, hasn't it?
Currently in that fund, there's 50,000? 50,500. That number was reduced at a previous select board meeting.
You mean the amount being contributed in Article 12?
Correct. It's typically either 15 or 20, if I do recall.
So we're ready to vote. If there are no comments, questions, or amendments to Article 12, see if the town votes to raise and appropriate some $10,000 to be placed in the previously established Transfer Station Capital Projects Expendable Trust Fund. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. Opposed? Article passes. Article 13, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $25,000 to be placed in the previously established Assessing Expendable Trust Fund. We probably have a hunk of money in there now, but we're getting started on doing an assessment going in the next year. So this is what we've been putting aside each year. I've moved and seconded by the selectmen. Are there any questions or comments with regard to this? State obligates us to do this every 5 years, and this is what it costs. Okay, all those in favor of Article 13 as written in your book, please raise your hand. Thank you. Opposed? Thank you. Motion passes. Article 14, see if town votes to raise and appropriate the sum of $10,000 to be placed in the previously established Historical Society Building Improvement Expendable Trust Fund. Moved and seconded by the selectmen. Thank you. Comments or questions with regard to the Historical Society building, which is looking good. Seeing none, we'll vote. All those in favor of Article 14, please raise your hand. Thank you. All those opposed? Thank you. Article 14 passes. We are rolling. Article 15, see if town, excuse me, will vote to raise and appropriate sum of $66,000 to be placed in the previously established Silver Lake Dam Improvement Expendable Trust Fund. Moved and seconded by the selectmen. Anybody want to give us a quick comment on this sum?
So this sum is for the study to see exactly what needs to be done. It's not the work itself, and it's actually not quite enough money. The thought process is to raise and appropriate some this year and some next year before moving forward. The original amount was $166,000.
Thank you. Comments or questions? Amendments? Yes, sir. Please come right up to that microphone.
Sean Bergeron, Forest Pines Road again. Adam, you're going to have to help me a little bit with this because I think, so some history. My company was asked by the Board of Selectmen, and I think now probably 2 or 3 years ago, to look at, not the dam itself, we were actually asked to look at the pedestrian bridge and the railings on the pedestrian bridge because there were concerns that they were inadequate at that time, and indeed they were. While we were looking at that aspect of the dam, that specifically the bridge, we realized that the dam itself was in a fairly significant state of disrepair. The last time that the town of Madison has done much work on that dam, if I remember correctly, Percy designed the work that we did, and it was Percy Hill, and it would have been back, I think, in the early 2000s. The amount that we had suggested, and I say we, Bergeron Technical is not doing the actual design of the repairs. It's an outside firm, but I think the number that was quoted to us just to put together the design work was $166,000. So unfortunately, if we put in $66,000 now, which is a step in the right direction, and if we look to raise the remainder, say next year, that number may or may not be adequate. Hard to tell. We don't know. My greater concern, and I think everybody in this room needs to be aware of this, is that whether we spend $66,000 or $166,000 now, the price for that damn dam is not attractive. I believe the budget, which was developed now probably 8 months ago to make the repairs, I think it was close to $1 million, wasn't it?
Correct.
So at some point in time, you know, all of us, the taxpayers of Madison, are going to be faced with, however we do this, $1.2 to $1.5 million of repair, design, and so on. So the longer we put this off, the more expensive it's going to be. And just be aware, in all likelihood, we're not faced at the moment for probably, hopefully for the next 2 or 3 years, we're not faced with a situation of a potential catastrophic failure of that dam. But we need to at least be cognizant of the fact the cost to repair and the cost to design those repairs isn't going to go down, and this thing is not going to heal. We've got to face this, you know, we've got to face this at some point in time. I appreciate the thought process of cutting that number, but just be cognizant of the fact that it's probably going to become more expensive down the road. Thank you.
Thank you. It's not going to heal itself. I'd never heard that before, but Silver that would reduce the property taxes coming from there. So, Article 15, as you see in your book, to see if town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $66,000 to be placed in the previously established Silver Lake Dam and Improvement Expendable Trust Fund. Any further discussion, questions, or amendments? Seeing none, we'll vote. All those in favor of Article 15, please raise your hand. Thank you. Article opposed, please raise your hand. Thank you. Article passes. You sufficiently scared everyone, Mr. Bergeron. Article 16, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $100,000 to be placed in the previously established groundwater remediation expendable trust fund. Moved and seconded by the selectmen. And would you like to take a second to tell us what that's for?
Sure. So several years ago, PFAS chemicals were detected in the well behind the library. It connects to the fire department, the library, town hall, and the DPW. So the town has to take remediation measures. Right now we're providing bottled water. We are required by the state to test. We had to install 5 monitoring wells to test the PFAS levels in the water around town complex. We were required to test the wells of residents within a 500-foot radius. So that has been done on the $35,000 that was raised and appropriated last year. Upcoming this year, I just received an invoice 2 days ago from our engineering firm that we're working with for a work order for $43,000 for our spring sampling event where they test the water, and for engineering work and the next report that the DES has requested. We will also be installing point of entry water filtration systems on the town complex and at the homes that have been detected as having high levels of PFAS chemicals. So we just received notification yesterday that a grant for $66,000 was approved to cover the installation and maintenance of the wells, which may increase, we may have to increase the number of water filtration systems when we do a sampling of a 1,000-foot radius. But the $66,000 will cover, not quite sure how much of that yet, but we'll need to continue maintaining those wells and testing those wells for the years to come.
Will the $66,000 in any way contribute to this 100 grant?
It does not. That is separate, and that will just cover the water filtration systems for the town and the surrounding properties whose water is tested high.
Are we part of any lawsuits that would involve recovery from PFAS manufacturers?
We are not. Chief Brooks has indicated that we haven't used foam for several years and that we don't likely have the paperwork for the manufacturers of foam that would contain the PFAS chemicals. One thing that we're looking at is the suits that the firefighters wear. It's known to have PFAS, and we're learning that they have the PFAS chemicals can be transferred dermally through the skin. So there may be potential there. Part of the engineering firm, they've also confirmed with me last week that because we have different PFAS chemicals in higher concentrations at different points around town complex, that there is a potential to kind of identify a chemical signature that theoretically could be traced back. So at this point, we're not in any lawsuits or able to recoup money through lawsuits, but there is a potential for that.
Thank you.
So if I could, sorry, just to add, so we have $43,000 that we will need to spend in this spring event and the extensive reporting that our engineering firm has to do. And then we will likely have a fall, like we did this past year. We had a fall sampling event and a fall report due that was 200 pages. Our first report to DES was 175 pages in July, and then they had to put together a 200-page report for this fall event. So 43 should cover through this spring, and then we will have to do more reporting and more sampling in the fall. So that will likely bring us right to the 100.
Thank you. Any further discussion or comments with regard to Article 16? Okay, we'll vote to see if town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $100,000 to be placed in the previously established groundwater remediation expendable trust fund. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. All opposed? Motion passes. See if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $997 to be placed in the PEG TV Expendable Trust Fund. The sum to come from the unassigned fund balance, which represents unused franchise fees from the 2024 operating budget. Moved and seconded.
moved.
Thank you, Selectmen. Sometimes we get more money from Spectrum than we expected, and it goes into the fund balance, and historically we've handed over that money to the Madison PEG TV, and that catches us up with them. And thanks to Madison Public TV for broadcasting this live. I want as big an audience as I can possibly get. The contract, I should negotiate a better contract. Article 17, any discussion or comments or amendments?
Just a quick comment, as stated before, more than likely this article won't be here next year because the franchise fees are significantly lower than the budgeted amount going forward.
Thank you. That's another discussion. Article 17, though. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of Article 17, please raise your hand. Thank you. Opposed? Motion passes. 18, to see if the town will vote to establish a master plan expendable trust fund per RSA 3119A for the purpose of updating the town's master plan and to raise and appropriate the sum of $25,000 to be placed in the fund, and further to name the selectmen as agents to expend from this fund. Moved and seconded?
Moved.
Thank you. And there is an error in the recommendations underneath Article 18 in your book, not recommended by the Advisory Budget Committee. It may not be a quorum, but the two abstentions don't count against the vote. So in fact, the vote was 2-0, and you can argue about whether there was a quorum and whether you include the abstentions or not. But it was, it would have been recommended or no vote, but not recommended. That's not a correct category. Any questions or comments with regard to Article 18? Yes, sir. You're all I got. Yeah, and you look lovely this morning. I just want to say, yeah, thank you.
I dressed up.
You did.
Hi, this is Mark Olson. I live at the dead end of Tasker Hill Road. And I'm the long-suffering chair of the planning board, and our master plan that is required by state law to be updated every 10 years hasn't been done in 20 years. And much in the world has changed, and much in this town has changed in the last 10 years, or even 5. And we're in the throes of revamping, updating our master plan. There's a town north of us that just spent like $80,000 to update the master plan. The master plan is foundational for all our land use regulations. And so it's important. And it's important that we have input and we update our master plan. And it's important that people come out and serve the master plan. We have 2 empty seats. We are statutorily required to meet every month. And twice in 24, we didn't have enough people to have a meeting. So we need a couple more people or more on the master plan. So 25,000 will get us started. We have a new member who's got a lot of enthusiasm, good enthusiasm for helping us with the master plan. And so hopefully we can get something with a 25.
And just to be clear, 25,000 will get us started. Do you think there might be additional expenditures necessary?
With any luck, not.
Okay.
So,
thank you. Stay there in case people have questions for you. I mean, move a little to the side.
Mr. Moderator.
Yes, please, go ahead.
So I just wanted to explain the 202 vote. This a warrant article was received rather late in the process. Originally, it was much more. I do know that we've had a citizen volunteer their time. We thank them because that took $100,000 off this warrant article. But one of the reasons we voted to abstain was we didn't have any information as to what that $25,000 was going to actually be spent on. And so, barring no information, we had no choice but, those two folks had no choice but to abstain. But if Mr. Olson can explain that today, that'd be awesome. Oh, no, Sloan, if you want to go first.
Mr. Olson, if you can just indicate who gets that money. Where does that money go?
So where does that money go?
Yeah.
We hope to do a poll of the town, administrative work, and publication work. We won't spend it. If you look at our budget historically, all our members serve without stipends, without compensation, and it's a lot of work. I mean, people put a lot of time into it, and so guaranteed we won't waste it.
Thank you. Ms. Jarrell? I've called you Sloan Jarrell for 25 years.
I know. Thank you for correcting yourself.
I will be better. Yeah.
I have a question. Since this is mandatory, is this something that should be in the CIP?
Well, the capital improvement plan, would you argue that it's not technically a capital expenditure? It's an operating expenditure. So
Okay. So no.
Yeah, good question. Other questions, comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of expending $25,000 for the town's master plan, please raise your hand. Thank you. Opposed? Motion passes. Article 19, see if town votes to raise and appropriate the sum of $10,000 for the purpose, of forest maintenance, the entire amount to come from the previously established forest maintenance account and no amount to be raised by taxation. Moved and seconded? So moved. Thank you. Does that money come from timber tax and current use, taking stuff out of current use? No, just the timber tax?
Just proceeds from foresting.
From forest, the timber tax, yeah.
Proceeds from foresting said land. It doesn't come from timber tax as you're explaining it.
We sell the rights to forest our land.
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. Yes, sir.
Ralph Lutchen. This is provides the ability to us to fund the forest management activities. So it's very simple. It's a matter of, historically, we've had this on the warrant articles for years now. And there's no impact to taxes. It's just drawing funds out of that account. The account currently has about $66,000 in it, and it will be refreshed as a result of activities.
Thank you. $66,000.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Other comments or questions with regard to Article 19? Seeing none, all those in favor of Article 19, please raise your hand. Thank you. All those opposed? Thank you. You put up your ballot. I was watching you. Okay. None of this stuff. I get to do that, but nobody else. Article 20, to see if town will vote to raise and appropriate sum of up to $5,000 for the purpose of land acquisition and conservation purchases, with said funds to come from the capital reserve for land acquisition and conservation purchases. Moved and seconded?
So moved.
Thank you. Do you know if this is for, go ahead.
Okay. This is for...
closer to the mic,
sorry.
please.
This is for the easement of chain of ponds. Essentially, it's legal expenses, and then other expenses. There is a baseline assessment plan that we have to review, and there's other issues like filing expenses and things of that nature.
For us to be the easement holder, we are being granted an easement to a portion of that land?
The whole land. The whole land. The whole 635 acres.
Thank you. And this is just the legal fees. And Upper Saco Valley Conservation is paying for us to be the holder of that.
We're paying
right up to that microphone.
We are paying them $213,000 for the easement. essentially. Gives us a substantial amount of rights involving our ability to manage the property. There's a whole series of things that we benefit as a result of this easement.
And where did we vote the $213,000?
This was done March of last year. There was a public hearing, and that was to indicate that there was public approval of the transaction.
And that was from the conservation funds that do come from the timber tax and from the removal of property from current use. So none of that came from taxation.
Yes.
Correct. Thank you.
Okay.
Do you all understand we're getting this big hunk of property and we're going to hold the easement to it down on the other end of Silver Lake, keeping it clean? Yes.
Dave Kirby, Heritage Road. So just for clarification, we're talking about expending our public funds towards a property that we're going to actually have limited usage of through the purchase of this property due to the grant sources that are going to limit the actual recreational activities that are allowed on the property. I definitely would not support that.
Would anybody like to comment on what the limitations are for the utilization of that property? Anybody remember?
I believe that's still in negotiations. That is part of the easement process, is writing the easement. I believe we're working back and forth with Upper Saco Valley Land Trust on that easement. And having attorneys involved is necessary to make sure that we get what we want out of the easement.
So things like hunting and snowmobiling and cross-country skiing, these would be the things that are on the and ATVs. Those would be on the table. Those would be part of the discussion as to what would be permitted or not permitted.
Yes, yeah, the easement has been written, rewritten, and it's in negotiations. So yes, exactly those types of things are part of those negotiations.
So for clarification, just to point out that one of those grant sources has made it perfectly clear that they will not fund this project without the stipulation that ATV use is not present. I don't know about some of the other activities, but that is one of the stipulations that will go away.
Yep.
Linda Haver, I was at that meeting when the people from Saco Valley Land Trust were there, and it was a public meeting. They had all kinds of maps, and the way I understood it, it was all still negotiable from what they said then, and we were going to have a lot of be able to use the land in a lot of different ways. And it's a huge, beautiful piece of land. I would fund it.
Mr. Kribbe?
I too attended that meeting and was assured both publicly as well as privately that there would be the opportunity. However, that group has openly shared with many people around town that their funding sources do not allow for mechanical recreation vehicles on that property.
Mike Vayu, just one quick question. My understanding was ATVs are not allowed in Madison. Does that, or what's the limit or range of that? I thought those were no longer allowed.
Depends on the piece of property.
Okay.
It depends on what?
It depends on who owns the property or what kind of restrictions are on that property.
So it's allowed on private property, but I didn't think it was allowed in any of the public ways. I could be wrong. I just wanted clarification on ATVs.
This particular piece of property does allow ATV use, and once this transaction takes place, that use will be denied.
Yes, sir.
Todd Milliken, Plains Road. I'm not familiar with what piece of property this is, and so I'd love to hear that description. And then I had a follow-up question.
So if you're at the head of the lake and you cross 113, all that wetlands that you notice there and the river up there and all back in there that was so heavily logged, it's back there.
Okay.
Off Forest Pines Road would be, does it abut at all Forest Pines Road? No, it's to the right of Forest Pines Road.
I don't think it abuts it, no.
To the left of Forest Pines Road, yeah.
And
you're not providing accurate information.
Well, go ahead then, Mr. Bergeron.
Thank you. Sean Bergeron, Forest Pines Road. The parcel of land that we are talking about is locally referred to as the Chain of Ponds. George, you're right. It's north of Silver Lake Village. If you start at, say, the Silver Lake Post Office or the train station, there's some land northward that is owned by the Sherwood family as we head towards Mack Pond. The next parcel northward is owned by myself and Linda. The northerly, probably 1/4 of Mack Pond up to Davis Pond is basically the parcel of land that we're talking about. Part of this transaction also involves about 7 or 8 acres, if I recall correctly, that abuts Forest Pines Road. So there's one parcel that is east of the railroad tracks, that's small, between the railroad tracks and Forest Pines. The significant land area is west of the railroad tracks from Mack Pond to up to Davis Pond. Now, historically, that property was owned by Bruce Thomas. When Mr. Thomas owned that property, there was almost no ATV activity on that property whatsoever. When the Crow family took ownership of that property from Mr. Thomas, Chris Crow and Rebecca live in Littleton, far away from this land, and ATV and snowmobile use has sort of just occurred over the past, since, I'm trying to think, probably 15 years. If you say to me, do the Crows necessarily approve of it? I don't know that they do. Do they necessarily oppose it? I don't know that they do that either. There has been ongoing conversation during the process of taking ownership or developing easements or whatever you wish to call it of that property as to what those uses will, what uses will be allowed. I don't know that that has been cast in stone yet. I do know that this entire transaction needs to be nailed down, I want to say by November of this year, I think, is when the closing officially takes place. So there's probably going to be some upcoming meetings about it, but I do think that some of these things, they still remain in flux and will hopefully have to be nailed down very quickly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You could have started with George, you were right about that, but okay. Yes.
So my other questions are more about, I don't know if you would say the philosophies or the goals, but when you read about a capital reserve fund for land acquisition, part of that cost is that land comes off our taxable, our income, right? So we have to make up for whatever value that was bringing in from Mr. Thomas, for example. So when we, two things, when we go to buy land for the town, do we acknowledge the cost perpetually per year in lost taxable taxes coming in? And more importantly, what is the overriding guidance or goal of this fund? To acquire land is not a town kind of thing to do without increasing the quality of life for everybody or something like that. So those are the two questions. Are we, for example, on this piece of land, how much are we losing each year?
Okay.
How much do we need to make up? And then what are the goals of this capital reserve fund?
Does anybody have a guess as to what the property taxes are associated with this property? Because it's certainly true we would lose those property taxes. And
I wouldn't venture to guess, but it is a true statement that we will lose revenue.
I mean, being current use, it would, off the top of your head, nobody.
That particular piece of land is in current use, so the amount of revenue isn't particularly high.
Okay. And the Conservation Commission, would you like to speak on behalf of the question of what the conservation? Boy, I don't think this is what we're actually here to do. What we're here to do is decide whether we want to spend $5,000 on the legal fees. But having said that, it's not unreasonable to understand what the legal fees are going to wind up achieving. So I'd prefer to simply point people at the Conservation Commission and their website and the information they have there, because Madison, like I think pretty much every other town in the state, does acquire land or has the right to, and most do acquire land for town purposes, and whatever that philosophy is it in writing, the Conservation Commission's priorities and goals?
We do, well, there is a mission statement.
Yeah, okay, all right, so that is available.
Right.
You had a question, though.
Marcia McKenna, I believe, and I haven't checked this year, I believe that my remembering is from last year that the taxes on that property were under $3,000. It was somewhere, I think, around $2,800. But this is just
Gives us an idea. Thank you.
And my other question about more information about taxes is that that's one of the main tributaries for Silver Lake, which is our largest tax revenue source in the town. And if the water quality, I mean, at one point they were trying to put a golf course there. If the water quality drops in Silver Lake, so will the tax burden, but the tax value of that lakefront property is going to drop too. So I would be more concerned about protecting Silver Lake and the tax revenue that's gained from there than I am about the current use tax revenue gained from the from the Chain of Ponds property now. And my other piece about the ATV use is that I believe this land is going to be bought by Upper Saco Valley and the Conservation Fund, which is a large federal fund. And once that property is bought, probably there will be no use because the $500,000 grant from Fish and Game, and again, it might be a different source, but there's one very large grant that does prohibit ATV use on the land. So we're talking now about having the easement so that we can control as much of that property as we can. If the land is bought and we don't have the easement, then we have absolutely no say as to what happens or who can use that property.
Just to be clear, the owner at the end of this is going to be us?
No.
Upper Saco, and then we will hold the easement that guards us from misuse of that property.
Correct.
And we get to look over their shoulders, yes.
Hi, I just want to clarify that whether or not we move forward with the property itself has already been decided, and today
Yes.
in front of us is just whether or not we're putting $5,000 towards lawyers to make sure that the easement is written in a way that benefits the town.
Right, and this is from money that we've raised every year, and we're not putting any money, and this year we're taking money out to get the legal fees covered.
Thank you. Very good. Yes. You don't have to stand that far back. It's not like the pharmacy where you don't want to know.
Hi, Liza Rogerson, Conservation Committee. I would say that the acquisition, we're not buying the land, we are purchasing an easement, which is a real deal, a better deal than a road grader. We will have it many years longer. And the battle of the 21st century is water, clean water. And those ponds drain into Silver Lake. And if you want to see your property value go down and your property taxes, wait until your well comes up bad. So if we could get beyond how we use the land and think about the long-term generational value of doing this, I think it's well worth every dollar we invest.
Thank you. Except for
Karen Stedman, 1403 Village
right up
Road.
close there, if you would.
Karen Stedman, 1403 Village Road. I would like to make sure that this goes through because I want to make sure that my well is good for the house that my grandfather and mother built and that I am trying to preserve now for my grandchildren who are 6 months and 3 years old.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Two last things, Mr. Moderator.
Yes.
Number one, everyone continues to state this is the chain of ponds and that it feeds primarily to Silver Lake. Actually, primarily on this piece of property, approximately 3/4 of it feeds to the north up to the Saco River watershed and not down to Silver Lake. And the predominant area that actually feeds to Silver Lake, if you were to at stream stats maps would actually be over in the East Madison Road area, and that area of Madison is the primary source of water that goes into Silver Lake, not this particular property. So just to be clear on that, that's the case.
Thank you.
And I'd like to move the question.
Well, I'm going to let the two people who are in line speak first, and then we can move that question.
And I just want to say that the actual purchase price of the chain of ponds is $1.5 million, and that we were asked to contribute the $213,000 that we had set aside for the last 20 years to go towards this property. So I think that's a really small percentage to have the land conserved and preserved and available for public use in the town.
Thank you.
Hope Hutchinson, Pitt Road. I got up to call the question, so I second that.
Okay. Then we'll have a vote. All those in favor of ending debate on this article, please raise your hand. Thank you. All opposed? So we have ended debate. We will now vote on Article 20 to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of up to $5,000 for the purpose of land acquisition and conservation purposes, with said funds to come from the Capital Reserve Fund for land acquisition and conservation purposes. All those in favor of Article 20, please raise your hand. Thank you. Opposed? Motion passes, and we learned a lot about a big hunk of land, which is good. Article 21, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $500 to offer the youth of Madison conservation training and instructive opportunities. This special article will be non-lapsing and non-transferable per RSA 3276 and will not lapse until the funds are spent on December 31st, 2027, whichever is sooner. Moved and seconded. Thank you. It is an odd little thing, but why are we doing this?
So typically, anything under $2,500 would be in the regular operating budget, but because it is a charity or a donation, we see that it needs to be a special warrant article.
And so this is an introduction to this, and in the future, if this kind of expenditure is occurring, it might be in the recreation budget going forward?
No, it won't be.
It's a one-time deal.
It may not be a one-time deal. It may be another warrant article going forward, but charities and donations monies are not fit to come out of a municipal budget.
I see.
So one thing, sorry, Mr. Moderator.
No, go ahead.
Okay. No, I just want to clarify that there was some money used last year that was put towards conservation programs with summer camp with Madison Rec. And I've spoken with the Conservation Commission, and they have a gift account that normally this probably would have come out of, but the gift account is only $67. It's very low at this point. So I've asked the Conservation Commission if instead of this being an annual warrant article, could they do some fundraising activities to bolster their gift account so that this would come out of that going forward?
Hear, hear. So that it's not an ongoing warrant article. Any further discussion or questions? Seeing none, we'll vote on Article 21. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. All those opposed? Thank you. Article passes. All right. We're getting there. We do that last batch all together. Article 22, though. See if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $100,000 to hire a certified engineering firm to perform a watershed management study and provide recommendations to protect the Silver Lake watershed, and to authorize for that purpose the issue of bonds or notes not to exceed $100,000 in compliance with the Municipal Finance Act, to authorize the selectmen to apply for, obtain, and accept federal, state, or other aid, if any, which may be available for said project, to authorize the selectmen to issue, negotiate, sell, and deliver said bonds and notes, and to determine the rate of interest thereon, the maturity, and other terms thereof, and to authorize the selectmen to take any other action, to pass any other vote relative thereto. Further, to authorize the selectmen to fully offset said appropriation by participating in the New Hampshire Clean Water State Revolving Fund. It is anticipated that there will be $100,000 in principal loan forgiveness under this. Further, to authorize acceptance of a donation from the Silver Lake Association of Madison to pay the full amount of interest on the loan. Moved and seconded by the selectmen. 3/5 ballot vote required, but it does not require the normal 1 hour wait that is necessary for normal bond issues that are over $100,000 so that we can do it by ballot, but we can keep whizzing along. I hope I emphasized things correctly when I read it, but do you want to do a quick explanation of why this is on there?
So it's a project that SLAM is going to oversee, and it is a loan for $100,000 that the intent is to be forgiven. The money needs to go through the municipality, but SLAM will handle the project, and they have agreed to pay the interest of the loan at the end of it. It's written the way it is because it is close to the figure as would be required for a bond, and that's why the 3/5 ballot vote is required.
So we're borrowing it up front, and then they forgive it, is the theory. If for some reason this doesn't get authorized or it gets canceled, we're not going to spend $100,000 of taxpayer money.
No.
Just want to make that clear. Any discussion or questions?
Nancy Martin, East Madison Road. If all of that is clear as mud, I'm here from the Silver Lake Association to maybe clarify some of that. I'm Nancy Martin, speaking as a town resident and a board member of the Silver Lake Association of Madison, otherwise known as SLAM. Thank you. The nonprofit organization that looks after the welfare of Silver Lake and the Silver Lake watershed. I appreciate this time to give a summary of the opportunity warrant Article 22 represents for our town. In the last 3 years, we've had experienced torrential rains that washed out roads and turned our water into the color of tea. We found forever chemicals, the PFAS, in our town wells and had our first cyanobacteria bloom in Silver Lake. The watershed management study performed by a professional environmental engineering firm will tell us what we need to do to protect our drinking water, streams, ponds, and lake from these kinds of problems. With the help of SLAM, the town has been pre-approved to borrow up to $100,000 from the Clean Water State Revolving Fund to perform such a study. At the completion of the study, the loan principal is forgiven, but SLAM will pay the loan interest at no cost to the taxpayers. Many New Hampshire towns are competing for this funding, and we are fortunate to have been pre-approved. Your yes vote will enable the town to proceed with this important project.
Thank you. Further questions, comments?
So,
yes.
Yes, one of the questions, if somebody from SLAM could answer, is that what are the I want to say the guardrails in place to ensure that we do meet the criteria for for making sure that this study is accepted. I know there are some. I'd just like the public to understand them.
Thank you. Mr. Lord.
Bill Lord, Plains Road. To answer your question, first of all, I am not a SLAM officer, but Mr. Scarborough and I did the application that Linda submitted after approval of your board, the Board of Selectmen, and the Conservation Commission. To answer your specific question, we intend to write the contract so that the contractor is required to provide us updates which come to the steering committee. We approve those, then Linda and the treasurer pay the bills as a normal bill. In order to not get to the end of this and somebody say, hey, this doesn't meet the criteria, one of the members of the steering group is actually the gal from New Hampshire DES who helped us write the application. So she's in our group to ensure that the product that we end up with is approved by DES, which then allows them to forgive the loan. The way we're also going to write the contract is so that they're required, the contractor, the engineering firm is required to give us updates, and we will request the money from the Clean Water Revolving Fund to come to us, and then we pay the bill from that money. So we don't even have to front the money. In the eventuality, perhaps, of big government canceling all these kinds of grants, we have limited exposure so that we would only ever have 60 days that potentially we might have to pay, unless, of course, the town decides to use the money to buy a grader. If you use the money for some other purpose, you can't get forgiveness of the loan. I hope that answers your question.
That's why he's a general and I'm just a moderator. Thank you. Any further comments or questions on Article 22? I will not reread it. All those in favor of Article 22, please raise your hand. I'm sorry. I would have caught it. I would have caught it. I was just about to say that. If you would take out your ballots and look at letter B as in boy, and tear it in half and put A, be A if you're in favor of Article 22, and B, no. Be yes if you're in favor, be no if you're not, and we'll take a couple of minutes to do that. Please go to the same buckets.
We're getting there, John.
$12:30. Give me till 12:30 to finish the meeting. What's my dollar amount? I know you gave it to me and I can't find it for the charities.
Oh, $32,000.
Even.
Yep.
I do remember that.
It's actually on the last page of the
Is it? I'm sorry. Okay. It is.
Well,
Meeting's called back to order. Is there anyone who has not yet voted on Article 22? Article 22? Anyone who has not yet voted? Then I declare the polls closed. We can gather up and do the count over there, and they'll bring it to my attention. And I'm going to ask you to move right along to Article 23. We have reason to want to move along a little bit here. Article 23, see if town will vote to allow the selectmen to appoint a capital improvement committee per RSA 674-5 that shall include at least one member of the planning board, one member of the advisory budget committee, one selectman, and at least 2 other registered Madison voters whose sole purpose shall be to aid the selectmen and the advisory budget committee in their consideration of the annual budget. Moved and seconded by the selectmen. Do we have any comments or questions? It's not a financial article. It's simply one to authorize the selectmen to appoint this committee with that membership. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Typically, the CIP is statutorily a planning board document. However, it hasn't been done in quite some time, and recently we've had some members of the budget committee and other people trying to put one together, and this seems like the best fit to have a committee that's completely steered toward one project and one project alone.
Thank you. Go
Mr.
ahead.
Moderator. Yep. So I've been one of the few people who's been working on our CIP for the past several months. Originally, the budget committee went to the board and said, do we want to have folks involved? And they said, for now, budget committee, fine. So to have more people involved and to possibly even hand off this spreadsheet to a committee, I'm in favor of it.
Very good. Please remember there's food in the back of the room. They want to sell their last bits of it, and they want your donations. Yes. Best dressed. Little round of applause. Best dressed, right? Thank you. Go ahead.
Again, Mark Olson. This statutorily is the responsibility of the planning board, which we did a fabulous job for several years, and it was totally ignored by the select board and the voters of the town. Are you within the law to create this board, and what are your expectations that anyone's going to follow it after it's written?
Attorney Bolt, $674:5. That authorizes them to do this.
I think they can create an advisory board, the select board, and then the body can say who the members should be.
Not that I want the job, but
I can testify to Mr. Olson's comments about the use of it in the past, and it would be a shame if we go to this trouble with additional people involved and not pay attention to it. So that I think is part of the moral to the story, right?
Yes.
Mr. Moderator?
Yes.
I'm sorry. So does the planning board want it to own it?
No.
Okay, just checking.
No.
Okay.
No.
I wasn't clear.
I mean, another study that we'll put on the shelf and I'll look at.
No, I just told them they had to look at it, so they're going to do what I told them. Don't worry about it. Okay. Further comments or questions on Article 23? Yes, sir.
Jeremy Cox. My question is this being proposed as a committee or a board? Because I'm under the impression that a board makes decisions and a committee just kind of advises and recommendations.
It would be a committee, but because of the statute, I believe the planning board would have to approve the CIP after that committee puts it together.
This is a group that's advisory and doesn't have carry authority to
Correct.
act. Yes.
Hi, Tia Gagnon, Pound Road. So just for clarification too, the master plan subcommittee will also be helping with a 6-year CIP and asking different departments and boards for their CIP.
So you see the two working together?
Yes.
I will give you this copy if you want, because we've got it going out 20 years, and we've already gathered information from the departments. Always happy to add more, but I'll share this with you guys so that you have It's only a draft, obviously, because it's not approved by the planning board.
Okay.
But obviously, yeah, don't want to be redundant in work and want to share what's already been done.
Thank you.
And thank you. I think we're ready to vote on Article 23 to appoint a capital improvement committee. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. Opposed, please raise your hand. Motion passes. Going back to Article 22, requires a 3/5 ballot vote. The ballot vote is 131 yes, 7 no. I declare Article 22 as having passed. Article 24, shall the town adopt the All Veterans Tax Credit in accordance with RSA 7228B for an annual tax credit on residential property which shall be equal to the same amount as the standard or optional veterans tax credit voted by the town under RSA 7228. Moved and seconded.
So moved.
Thank you. And so it's fair to say that this says there's an expansion of the number of veterans who would be eligible for a veterans tax break, tax credit, and that the amount is up to $500.
And
So-
just for clarification, we would remain, both credits would remain in place.
And we have an existing one, and this would expand it to people who have served.
Not in conflict.
Not-
So the original credit is for veterans that have served during a conflict period. This credit does not have that requirement.
So all veterans would be eligible.
Correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Moderator?
Yes.
Point of clarification, this would be for all honorably discharged veterans, not just any veteran. They have to have honorably served. And number two, it wipes out, there's an error just past the Korean War and before the Vietnam War, where those veterans who honorably served are not currently allowed to get that credit. The state rectified this issue a little over a year ago and passed a second RSA that says towns can choose which one to go by. And with this article, we would be choosing to go by the one that's more inclusive of our veterans who have honorably served.
Thank you. Thank you. Further discussion on Article 24? Seeing none, we'll vote. All those in favor of Article 24, please raise your hand. Thank you. Opposed? Motion passes. Article 25. I'm going to ask the petitioner to go to the microphone to be prepared to move the question, but before I consider that, I'm going to recognize the gentleman who is approaching the microphone right now. Please.
Mr. Moderator, in light of the fact that I've reviewed a lot of the minutes on the town website and have not found any blatant occurrences of impropriety on the part of any town official or town employee, I would object to the consideration of this question.
So I have a, so sir, you are moving to, as a point of order, to pass over this article.
Correct.
Is there a second to that? That's not debatable, it's a point of order. So Mr. Arruda has seconded that, so that we can now vote to see whether we want to pass over it. It is a legally petitioned article. It's worth me noting that, as far as I'm aware of. Anyway, it's placed on here because it's been checked by the supervisor's checklist, the 25 signatures and all that. We have a point of order on the floor saying that we should pass over this article and not consider it. It's not debatable, so we'll simply have a vote. All those in favor of passing over Article 25, please raise your hand. Thank you. All opposed, please raise your hand. Thank you. So we will consider Article 25. We can still vote yes or no on the article, but we will now consider it and potentially debate it. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Elizabeth Reed Fernandez, Kobe, Peak Vista Lane. There is a state RSA law or policy.
I need someone to put the article on the floor. So would you like to move the article?
Oh, sure.
No, they don't do it for petition ones. The lead petitioners generally are the ones who...
Do I have to read it? What do I have to do?
No, all you have to do is say, I'd like to put Article 25 on the floor.
Okay, I'd like to put Article 25 on the floor.
Is there a second? Thank you. I have lots of seconds. Ms. McKenna is the one I saw first. Yes, please, Ms. Fernandez.
The state has an RSA policy on conflict of interest, and it's worded basically, can you hear me?
Now,
Exactly the same
closer.
as this petition. It says no full-time employee can be at the same time a town selectman in the town they work in. So we have part-time employees. We have employees that have part-time employees that have a budget. They create budgets. They buy equipment and stuff like that. I think it's just a common sense thing that we just put in no employee rather than no town employee rather than just full-time.
Thank you. So it already is not permissible for a full-time employee. What this would do, it would make it impossible for a part-time employee to also be a selectman.
Specifically selectman.
That's what this calls for.
Mr. Moderator?
Yes.
I don't think that this speaks to anyone who has currently or previously served, because I agree that has not been any impropriety of any sort. I just think it's common sense and best practice moving forward.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
I'm the guy. Just to let everybody know. This strikes me as being there's some nefarious thing going on. I've been working for this town for 25 years, and in the last 3 years I've served the second position of managing the transfer station. By doing
Can you
this-
check the microphone? I'm sorry. Can you make sure it's on, Mike? Okay.
Is it on?
Yeah, get right in it.
So it strikes me
Good.
that by writing this up and then serving this town for 25 years, and I only know of one other person who was a part-time employee, that there's something nefarious going on. And we're trying to prevent something that is not happening. What you're giving up when you give up on people that have this experience is a tremendous amount of institutional knowledge. Sure, you could go out and find someone outside the town to come in and work. They don't care about the town. They've never stepped forward to take the heat like these people are going to take. So I ask you not to approve this article.
Thank you. Other comments or questions on Article 25? Yes, ma'am.
One of the reasons for, I believe, expanding, if you will, the conflict of interest type of efforts is that we don't want to enter into a situation where we have a selectman who is voting on, articles, voting on budgets, voting on bonuses, voting on those kinds of things that benefits themselves and or puts them in a situation where they have to abstain from a vote, and that could be the tiebreaker. It just alleviates that situation, and no one, I believe, is pointing fingers at any single individual. Yes, Mr. Arruda, this would not allow that type of situation to continue, but it also alleviates and creates more transparency for the taxpayer with what the votes mean and what your motive for voting is.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
I'll just reiterate, this. I think this is a problem. I'm sorry, I'm Mark Fonts from Go Hill Road.
Thank you.
This is a solution looking for a problem, and we don't have that problem. Part-time employees in this town, I feel like we're telling the part-time employees that they are, because they're working for the town, that they shouldn't have any say in what goes on in the town. It's hard enough for us to get enough people to sign up to serve on boards and committees in this town, and we're going to tell people that if you work for the town part-time, then you can't serve on the select board. You know, it's the select board now. Maybe in the future it becomes all boards and committees. In the statute says no person who holds the office of selectman, treasurer, moderator, trustee of funds, collector of taxes, auditor, or highway agent. So what's to stop us from including more positions in the town? This is a solution looking for a problem.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Cheryl Brooks, is it all part-time employees from every department? Like, could a part-time librarian or someone who works for the rec department? You say part-time town employee. I consider anyone who works for a town building a town employee. Does it encompass all of that? Anyone who works as a summer rec?
Well, I can ask the attorney, but I would assume if you're a town employee in any department, it would apply to you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Moderator, Deb Parsons again. Just question for consistency's sake, are school employees allowed to be school board members?
School employees may not be school board members.
I just see this as very similar. We have that for a reason, so I think for consistency's sake, it's not against any one person, but again, it's just, if we expect this in one area, I don't think it's unreasonable to expect it in another area.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, I'm Mary Cronin. I live in, where do I live? 80 Kingswood Circle, excuse me. There's case law that's related to a library director, part-time library director serving as a town selectman in Littleton, and there's a case that the New Hampshire Library Trustees Association cites that says that this is allowed for a part-time library director to also be a selectman. There was a case brought forward, and it's on the library trustees, guidance for library trustees, just to...
Well, perhaps I'm wrong, but under the current law, a full-time employee cannot serve as a selectman. That's currently the case. It would only be if something like this passed, which is authorized, it's legally permissible to place this restriction. If this passed, then that part-time librarian in Wilton would not have been allowed to have been a selectman. So they must not have had this kind of an ordinance.
That may be the case. Thank you.
Thank you. Any correction from the attorney?
Not that I can recall.
Thank you.
Jake Bowie. Problem I have is that you're now eliminating people to run who we can't find to run for our boards now, and you're also discrediting the rest of that board. Because one person can, yes, be the deciding factor, but if there's already 2/3, like you would have to fleece the other people on your board to get you to go along with that, right? So I feel like you're taking away from the board you have now, and also at what point does it become, and family? So now you have town employees and their family can't, like at what point does this stop?
Mr. Moderator?
Yes.
There currently are town policies against conflict of interest within the employees, within, outside of the selectmen. So there's nepotism policy and conflict of interest policy. So this is, to me, it's weird that there's like a significant debate about this, because to me it just makes sense. I mean, we talk about people not wanting to run. We had 6 people run for 3 seats on the select board. I don't think that, I don't know, it just makes complete sense to me to remove any doubt of conflict of interest. I mean, there are plenty of cases where, planning board member has, their wife is promoting something and they have to excuse themselves from that vote. It's nationwide, it's statewide. It just makes sense to remove any doubt. It just makes sense to not have, if they were a selectman, to have an employee voting on their own budget or voting or approving raises for their colleagues. Like, it just removes any doubt whatsoever. It removes any potential for conflict.
Thank you.
Ned Rogerson. I believe we put this in last year for the advisory budget committee, that we wouldn't allow that for conflict of interest. Also, I believe recusing yourself is not something that the chairman asks a member to do. It's something that an individual member has to elect to do. So if you don't have this, and you do have the situation occur in the future, there's no guarantee that that person may not vote on something that concerns them. And for that reason, I think this is appropriate.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Ma'am, you're going to speak, or you're going to buy some food? Oh, both are good. Both are acceptable. There we go.
Hi, I'm Clarice Gerard, and I live in Banfield Hollow.
Come as close as you can.
I'm short. Hi, my name is Clarice Gerard, and I live in Banfield Hollow, and my question is, if something like this passes, what happens to Mr. Aruda that has a wealth of knowledge as a selectman, and he's an employee at the same time?
Well, of course, Mr. Aruda is stepping down from the selectman position, so we don't need to talk about any other specific situation at the moment.
Mr. Moderator?
Yeah.
I just want to echo what Mr. Bowie said. In a specific circumstance, we look at our rec department and how much trouble we have finding part-time employees to serve as summer rec counselors. If there were to ever come a need where I would need to step into that role to fill a position for the children of this town, I would not be able to do so as a member of this Board of Selectmen. And I think given the population of the town of Madison and like has been stated before, the lack of willingness to participate in certain boards, it's going to pose a significant issue for a multitude of reasons.
Mr. Attorney, for what it's worth, if someone received a stipend for coaching soccer, would they're not, I don't believe, according to wage and hour, they'd be employees, part-time or any kind. Would they be permitted to receive a stipend without being categorized as an employee? Why don't you think about that? We'll have the next person come up and speak. I get to make up questions like this just to challenge them.
I get it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Linda Haver. First of all, maybe there's something nefarious going on that I'm not aware of, but I want to support John Aruda, and I want to support John Aruda at the same time saying that I agree with this policy to eliminate conflict of interest. But John has been a fabulous selectman in town. I love seeing him at the dump. I don't think this is about John at all. I think this is about avoiding a conflict of interest in the future. And I think I probably speak for most people in town in our appreciation of John.
Thank you. Yes, please. Mr. Bolt, do you have an opinion?
I was hoping you'd forgotten the question. I think it would be governed by whether or not the stipend has any withholding applied to it.
Oh, good one. Good answer. Okay. Well, Mr. Price, you don't want them withholding any money from your pay anyway.
No, and I wasn't speaking to stipends
I understand.
either.
I understand that.
And just for the record, we don't give stipends to our coaches.
Thank you.
They're all volunteers.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so we're back to Article 25. We're about to vote. To see if the town will vote to adopt an incompatibility of offices ordinance. And the word sick is there because the word ordinance was misspelled. But you can ignore all of that. There is an I in ordinance. Ordinance, as is spelled there, has to do with shooting people. And that doesn't appear relevant. Whether the town should have ordinance or not is an interesting question, but as follows. No town employee shall at the same time hold the office, no town employee shall at the same time hold the office of town selectman. Not just full-timers, but it would include part-timers. So if you're in favor of adding to the restriction on part-time town employees also not being able to be selectmen as well as full-time employees, please raise your hand. Thank you. Opposed? Please raise your hand. Boy, you people don't want to go home at all. I'm going to do one more visual one. All of you in favor of the ordinance as printed in 25, please raise your hand.
What the fuck?
Thank you. All opposed? I believe the ayes have it. Does anyone want to object and require a standing vote? Feel free if you think so. You do. Okay. So we're going to have a standing vote, and I'm going to ask Ms. Stackpole in the back, and I'm going to ask, who do I want to ask in the front? I don't know everybody. I'm going to ask Ms. Schilling in the front to do the count. Please stand if you are in favor of Article 25 of adding the additional restriction on part-timers. And Ms. Stackpole, you're going to do this side of the whole place, and Ms. Schilling is going to do the other side.
Nicole, are you standing?
How many? 44. And Sharon?
32.
Okay, and now you're all sitting, and would those of you who are opposed to Article 25, please stand. Ms. Stackpole, if you would do all the people in the back row. Ms. Schilling, do not count the people in the back standing, up against the wall. Thank you. Nobody counts me.
You don't want me to count these guys?
I do want you to count them.
29.
And you got the whole back wall people. Sherry? You got the whole back wall group. Yeah.
Okay, and I'm taking the people on the side.
On that whole side, yes, but not the back wall. She's counting.
37.
$26. 27,
I forgot.
If it was 1 or 2 votes, I'd have a ballot vote, but it's 76 yes and 64 no, and that seems about right. So, from what I saw, so 74 yes, 64 no. Article 25 passes as written in your book.
We get ordinance.
So we do have a new addition to that ordinance, or we have an ordinance to that effect. We get ordinance. Number 26. Yes, sir.
Make a motion to do all the charitable contribution warrant articles as a single piece.
I was just going to ask, and the total amount of those is $32,000. Would you incorporate that into your motion?
How much was it? I'm sorry.
$32,000.
I move we do articles 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32 for a total of whatever it was.
$32,000.
$32,000.
Thank you. And do I have a second for that? I do, Mr. Kribbe. We have a couple on here I just want to give a quick comment on and then explain the process. So number 31, the waste station, is a new one, and sometimes people want to pull that one out and do a new one for the first time separately. And the Ospey Children's Fund has communicated with the town before, has asked for money before, but this is the first time they've submitted the petition. So you could argue that they were also a new one. And that information is in blue on the next page on your sheet. So if anyone would like to either comment on any individual one or would like to have one of these pulled out and vote on separately, you can make such a motion to do that. Otherwise, we'll have a single vote on all those articles for a total of $32,000 in charitable giving. Yes, sir.
Just a quick comment. I reviewed all the charitable contributions for the ABC. I put together a spreadsheet. I worked with Linda. The Way Station and the Ospey Children's Fund are new, but we looked at their missions, and I specifically asked, what's the impact for Madison residents? And a majority of these I know personally. I'm the chairperson for the Madison Food Pantry, so I work across the community with a lot of these. Way Station, they support the homeless here. It's a very transient homeless population. We do have homeless people in Madison, people living in cars down at the McDonald's, parking lot, that type of thing. And we do have homeless people that come to the food pantry for food. The Ospey Children's Fund, I reached out, and I believe they gave a lot of scholarships to the rec committee. Yeah, so we got $5,000 or $6,000, I believe. Joy will know, Ms. Gray will know. But so we did review these, we did vet these charities, and they're all very good, and we're getting a big bang for our buck for the work they're doing in Madison.
Thank you, Mr. Dame. We're ready to vote then on Articles 26 through 32 for a total of $32,000. Is there any further discussion? Yes, sir.
That is a motion to vote on the motion first, and then you vote to approve. Just to be safe.
Okay. I interpret it differently. I believe he... Okay. So being safe is always a good thing. So we'll vote first on whether you agree to incorporate all of those articles into a single vote. All in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. All opposed? Motion passes. And now we'll actually vote on Articles 26 through 32 for a total of $32,000. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. All opposed? Thank you. Is there a motion to adjourn? And just yell yes. Yes. Thank you all very, very much.